Another Sunday, another case of the Scaries to start your work week. Welcome to the newest edition of the Sunday Scaries, where we have all your gore, lore, and more, covering all the latest horror happenings, slicing open all the latest horror news and dissecting it bit by bit, finding all those juicy innards. Pour that cup of coffee and turn on your fright light while we take you on a tour of terror. Right, Dylan? Come on. We're getting excited. We're in
Yeah,
Splatterthon here.
we
It's getting
are.
very serious here. This is the first Sunday Scaries of October. We have officially made it.
I know this is very exciting. It's always good waking up on a Saturday and then kind of coming in and flipping on some horror movies, and it just feels different. We're walking around yesterday. We're running a couple errands, me and the family, and it's nice and cool out. Got hoodies on. Everybody
Overcast,
else is
leaves changing.
complimenting. Yeah, everybody's complimenting your horror shirts and everything you're wearing. It's just everything gets dialed up a little bit more once October rolls around. So
You're stabbing people, throwing knives in the trash. I mean, it's getting real out here now.
just not giving a shit about anything. Yeah.
Doesn't matter.
Just inviting people over to your apartment. Everybody's complaining about the smell. Just I've been
You got
watching
some
Dahmer, if
leftover
you can't
pork
tell.
chops
Yeah,
in,
that
in
went
there.
bad.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I'm about 5 episodes in.
Oh, really?
Yeah, my
Oh, I
wife
didn't
and
know you
I.
committed to this already.
Oh no, yeah, no, I know we didn't talk about it much this
No,
week.
not
It's
at
been so
all.
busy that like we didn't even discuss it. But no, yeah, my wife and I were watching it together, so it takes time. And then
Yeah.
ultimately we got 5 episodes in, and then we took a break because I was on TikTok, and a What We Do in the Shadows TV show like clip came up, and I was just like, oh shit, that season's over. So we're just cutting through that real quick. It's like a little palate cleanser because it's been
Yes.
pretty intense, but we're loving it. Like it's a really great show. I mean, Evan
Absolutely.
Peters is absolutely phenomenal.
And, I think we made it to maybe episode 8. We actually stopped because we wanted to take it in a little more because we know it's such a limited series that we're not going to get this again. So it was like, hold on, let's not blow through this and kind of take a little detour. And I mean, obviously, being beginnings of October here, end of September, there were many things to start watching and to kind of brush up on for kind of our content and things. So we've
Oh
been
yeah,
staying busy in that aspect. And I think what Ryan Murphy has another thing coming out mid-October called The Watcher, which we haven't
something
talked about
like
at
that.
all.
Yeah,
So,
that guy's
um,
busy, so he's got all kinds
um,
of stuff he's
that looks
producing and
interesting
writing.
too. I don't know if it's going to really hit like Dahmer did, but I'll give that one a watch as well.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like when you're talking about true crime stuff, especially stuff that's so infamous like this, it's kind of one of those things where it's like, I think you'd get a bigger draw when it comes to stuff like that. But like, I mean, hey, I mean, the dude's got his name attached to so many projects. I mean, it's
Yeah.
probably going to get some fan service. So,
Yeah, and I mean, he had that following from what is it, American Horror Story? So,
mhm.
and I don't even know necessarily if it crossed over for Dahmer because Jeffrey Dahmer is just such a pop culture kind of character now. So notable from the events in the 80s and 90s where as soon as that kid popped up, I think people were making it a point to watch it. So I think he's even gotten probably fans just from Dahmer alone. So I can't imagine kind of the talking point that The Watcher will be coming out in a few weeks right after Dahmer here, because Dahmer has been just all over social media. Everyone's been
Yeah.
talking about it, so many different videos of, depending on how you take it, where they're kind of, memes and things like that. So
Yeah,
it's
and I
all
mean,
over.
it's one of those things too where it's like there's been a lot of discourse, as always is with anything now that comes out. There's a lot of people on here saying like, "Oh, don't watch the show. Don't you're glorifying a serial killer and all this stuff." And it's just like, I think that this show is the furthest thing from glorifying. I think that it's showing you what happened, and it
The
doesn't present him.
atrocities.
Yeah, it never presents him in a like sympathetic light. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
like you can kind of see his how he's raised, but when it comes down to his punishments and everything, it's like, no, he's a monster, and he knows that. You know what I mean? Like there are moments, like especially when he's a young kid, and you see stuff with him and his parents and stuff like that, where you have sympathy for him a little bit as a child because he's still a child at that point. You know what I mean? He hasn't killed anybody or anything.
Yeah.
And you kind of get the sense that, between everything with his mother and what she was dealing with, and just the environment he was raised in, that it's like you can kind of see where he kind of started to fall off the rails a little bit.
Yeah.
And they do portray that it like that. They do in My Friend Dahmer as well, which is interesting because like we love that movie, and like we were talking about it heavily when it came out. And it's one of those things where it's like watching them almost have an alternative take of recreating some of this stuff
Yeah.
in this. It's interesting. I like it's again, that movie ends um at a certain point where he's about to do his first kill, um and to see the continuation of how it went and everything is just so enthralling. I know I told my sister, who was watching it with us, about that movie. She didn't know about it, so she's been trying to find somewhere to stream it, because she wants to watch it, because I told her that it would probably go really well with this, because she's already seen the whole show. She
Yeah.
binged the whole thing in like a day or something stupid like that. So
And My Friend Dahmer's usually streaming. I'd seen it on Tubi quite a bit, so
mhm.
it's usually out there pretty well. I mean, before I remember going to the Nightlight to go see it, which is just a local kind of art house theater um, locally here, and that was the only place that had shown it. And I think maybe they may have extended a couple nights because it was
No, they
absolutely
did
sold out.
because it kept selling out, I remember.
Yeah. It was such a big deal, and then once the Blu-ray came out, I snagged that one up, just because it wasn't streaming anywhere, it wasn't available, and then it kinda started popping up on streaming services, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, now I can actually recommend this to people because, people have the availability to see it," because that is a great filmmaking,
Mhm.
and, I don't find any of this kind of glorifying, the actions of Jeffrey Dahmer in any sense. It's just kind of storytelling where you have to understand the human being behind these travesties that he committed. So it's like we're not really here to feel sympathetic. I mean, if there are instances where you do feel that, I don't know necessarily if that's an indictment on a filmmaker at all. It's just kind of the storytelling that naturally goes with kind of telling the character's backstory. So, and especially diving into Dahmer, I don't really think that there is any particular scenes where you feel that sorry for Jeffrey Dahmer. I mean, definitely for his victims, and I think that's a big discourse of, especially when you look at some of these characters or characters in the TV show, and then kind of put the actual faces to the characters and the actors playing them, and you see the actual victims themselves. I mean, I think that takes a whole different spin. I think it's so enlightening because, I mean, we've talked about it where it's kind of weird where sometimes people will say, "Oh, such and such is my favorite serial killer," and it's like, it's one thing to say you love Michael Myers or Jason Voorhees, but it's a different level to say you love Ted Bundy or John Wayne
It's
Gacy.
the same sense of like saying, oh, the Vietnam War is my favorite war. You know what I mean? It's like
Exactly.
it's probably poor verbiage, but really what you're saying is, you know, is as far as doing research and looking into this stuff, it is my most it is the time and event that I am most interested in.
Yeah.
Is how I would interpret something like that. It's
Yeah.
just like it's not like you're sitting here saying like, oh, it's fucking badass, it's so cool, I love it. No, it's like for me, like when I say that, it's like the Vietnam War for me is, I think, one of the most interesting times in our country's history, in the world's history. So it's just one of those things where it's like I like looking into that kind of stuff, and I like watching documentaries on it and everything that was going around at that time in the 60s. So, it's one of those things where it's like when you talk about serial killers, yeah, it's like if you say Dahmer's my favorite or Zodiac, like for me, it's the Zodiac killer. I think that
Yeah.
he is the one I'm the most interested in. Just from a standpoint, especially since, he's never been formally, caught or anything like that. I think a big influence from that, and what I was going to kind of bring up here to piggyback off what you were saying is, these people who are saying this stuff, they didn't say anything when, Mindhunter was on.
Yeah.
And we're talking about the co-ed killer and all this stuff. They didn't say anything with that Zac Efron Ted Bundy movie. What is that? Incredibly vile, cruel, whatever.
Yeah. I can't remember the title.
Not a bad movie, but it's on Netflix. But it's I think it's just because this one got so popular and blew up so big for people, that it was just one of those things where it's like it's just getting to such a broader audience that more people are coming out of the woodwork who otherwise, if it hadn't blown up, probably wouldn't have never even known about it. They
Yeah.
would have seen it on Netflix and just clicked right by it, but they've seen it and they see people talking about it, so they feel they have to say something.
Yeah, they want to join the conversation and kind of, no matter what gets popular, there's always going to be an argument to be had, just for the sake of arguing. So, I mean, these events here, especially like Dahmer, it's great to see, these kind of, everyone knows about Jeffrey Dahmer, but even watching this, I didn't know about some of his victims. I knew of some of the killings. But not every little tidbit or all of his backstory, even after seeing My Friend Dahmer and listen to podcasts. People just tend to focus on certain things. So it's like to see something that is such great filmmaking and a great portrayal of the actual person, to be brought to something like Netflix, where it's so accessible to people and it becomes a talking point, and then people become more aware of the atrocities that have been committed. I think it's a great thing. It's just almost I feel like we're like a turn in culture where we talk about it, where maybe it was the 80s, I don't know, where horror became more okay to talk about. I mean, like, I think it's more okay to talk about nowadays in terms of being a fan, and kind of this kind of deep dives into serial killers, true crime, even just random fictional horror stuff. We're in such a transitional period now where I think a lot of people are openly talking about being fans of horror as opposed to even 10 years ago.
Yeah, and I mean it goes hand in hand because, like we said, with the whole true crime boom that's been going on for like almost the last like 7 8 years, I would say. I mean, it's been on for a while. Like the true crime has always been a thing, forensic files, all that
Yep.
stuff. But it's one of those things where it's like I think you really started to see this pick up when like Netflix started releasing documentaries, and all these streaming services started releasing these more raw, uncut kind of breakdowns. Like the one that I can think of that really affected me and honestly made me pretty sick to my stomach was the Night Stalker
Oh yeah.
documentary. Like that was pretty intense the way they presented that and how he operated and stuff. But it's just one of those things where it's like we have Serial is like a huge podcast that you can stream pretty much anywhere at this point. So it's just like it goes hand in hand. Yeah, I mean, like as a society, we've opened the door to talking about this stuff, being more comfortable with this stuff. So it's like you're going to have detractors, but I think for the most part, this is more of a positive. It gives people even though it's drama, this specifically Dahmer is a bit of more of a dramatization. I think it's like, and not to take away from it, but I think it does present people to say, maybe I should, when I smell fire, maybe I should, let somebody know. And because
Yeah.
you look at this in this show, they even show it as to where like people aren't being taken seriously. The cops are treating him just like he's just some normal guy. Like everybody is just so out of sight, out of mind on this stuff. There's just no way this guy's cutting people up and eating them in his apartment when all the signs were there. It's like he wasn't very good at hiding things. It's like
Yeah.
if anybody at any point could have found out, but it's just nobody was paying attention.
Yeah. Very impulsive, very, had given every opportunity to be caught, and no one had really listened to some of the people around him saying that there's something off. So,
Hmm.
um, you know,
Especially his
I,
poor neighbor. Holy shit. Like
I could
from
not
episode
imagine.
1, which I mean, I thought that was interesting, and we're not going to go into like a whole review here, but I love that way that the series starts by showing you when he got caught, because I didn't expect that. So, I like the structure of it. And, it's just like to have her sitting there saying, like, I called you guys so many goddamn times about this. Like, I have literally done it and you guys just ignored it. And now, how many bodies are in there kind of thing. It's just like, yeah, like there were people who were paying attention, but those people weren't being taken serious.
Yeah. So, you said you're on episode 5?
Yes, yeah. Mhm.
Okay. Yeah. See, I'm excited for you to get through more of it because, like I said, I'm on episode 8, and you deep dive into a few more things. I think there is a very, can't remember what episode it is, but it's a very emotional uh, kind of story. I think you probably, if you've seen some memes, you may be a little aware of it, but just to think of some of the things that happen, kind of how impulsive. Jeffrey Dahmer becomes is it's heartbreaking. It's very very different, but very very interesting kind of deep dive into Jeffrey Dahmer in that true crime aspect. But we did take a break from some of the things that we do enjoy, and we did make it out to the theater to see a Smile, which I want to say we
Yes.
didn't enjoy. I think that would be kind of overstepping a little bit, but definitely not in the streak of films we've been seeing.
No, that was definitely a little bit of lacking substance, in my opinion. I think that, I've seen a lot of positive reviews for it. Like we said in our review, this is going to hit for a certain audience. I'd say a more generalized audience. For me, it was just kind of like I said, I've seen this trope done a couple of different ways. It's kind of something that's just more, it didn't really leave anything new or lasting for me. And by the time they kind of get to some of that real interesting imagery and stuff, I'm already so beyond checked out. And it's not like I'm sitting here seething on it. Like, we sat through the week, we got to see it early. So, we sat through the week here, and I was curious to see what people are thinking as the days got closer and more reviews were posted.
Yeah,
And I think that we're kind of in the minority on it. It seems like a lot more people were excited to give this a chance. And like, not to say we weren't giving it a chance, but it's just one of those things where I'm just like, it just was what it was. I kind of feel
yeah,
like we got spoiled a little bit with some pretty high quality stuff. Jeepers Creepers aside, it's been a really solid couple of weeks at the movies, and
yeah,
I was really happy to have that. And I think we needed to be humbled a little bit. And
yeah.
again, it's not a horrible movie. Like I said, it's very middle of the road.
Yeah. I mean, I guess slightly underwhelming just because of what we had been seeing. And then, I wasn't really sold on the trailers at all. I thought it kind of looked suspect at best. And then you had said that there's some positive things coming out about it. So I was like, okay, we'll give this a shot. So then maybe my hopes had heightened a little more than they should have. Um, I mean, competent filmmaking, it just isn't something that
Hmm.
really knocks my socks off in terms of wanting to go back and watch, especially after what we've been kind of exposed to over the summer. So, not a, I guess, bad note to officially end kind of the run there in terms of like right before we get into these Halloween releases. But, adequate at best, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, like, if you were asking me, I enjoyed this a lot more than I enjoyed Jeepers Creepers, but it is one of those things too where again, I wouldn't say that any of the filmmaking behind it was bad, and I'm talking like technical terms.
Yeah.
There's definitely some competence there. There was some cool shots, some cool, ways of setting things up. I really just think from a narrative perspective, I've seen this concept done before, and I just think that I saw it done a little bit better and a little
Yeah.
fresher
Yeah.
a few times before this.
I think it was pretty basic storytelling for the most part. You can pretty much take that kind of plot and apply it to, a dozen other horror films.
Mm,
So it wasn't really anything unique. They really did kind of fall into the basic tropes of a lot of horror stuff. They didn't really kind of go against the grain in any sense. So I
mhm.
mean, again, not bad. If it pops up on streaming, sure, go ahead and check it out. But overall, just
Yeah,
I want to make it out to the theater.
that was my big recommendation of it too. It's just like I think this is a much stronger streaming film than going to the theater. But I mean, again, if you're interested in it, definitely check it out and let us know what you guys think, because
Yeah,
like I totally see
the appeal at
a
least.
lot more people going to see this and liking it. I mean,
Yeah,
especially if you're not in this space, if you don't watch a ton of horror, and it's like you kind of just like to go for those big tentpole releases, this will probably knock your socks off, because
yeah.
it's like it's got some really cool imagery, it's got some really creepy stuff, but like, again, I think it's just a little too late.
Yeah, and I could see this having living a pretty decent life during the Halloween season here. Just to
Yeah.
go to the theater and kind of, because it's nothing too experimental in any sense. Like you said, very basic, very digestible. If you just want to go for a date night and have to try and mildly be scared or very scared, depending on what you find scary. But we are officially gearing up into the Halloween season. We have Hellraiser coming out this week, so
Hmm.
this kind of
And
Go ahead.
oh, and I was gonna say, and we're also gonna be checking out another movie this week, which we got to drive what, 45 minutes for that one?
Yeah, it's somewhere around there, actually. Yep.
Yeah, we're making a commitment for you guys. See something that we're not super familiar with, but I think we'll kind of save that towards the end of the show here. But yes, Hellraiser, I am very much looking forward to.
Yeah. So, again, I think people have come out and started talking about it a little more. At least I think I've seen some headlines for it, and people
Yeah,
are.
it premiered at Fantastic Fest this week. It was one of the secret screenings. Like,
Yep.
so at Fantastic Fest, they always do secret screenings of stuff. Smile was the first one. I think there was one more, but I know Hellraiser was the big one, and the reviews are glowing.
Yes.
People are in love with this. They say that it is an absolute return to form for the franchise, that everything is firing on all cylinders, and it is going to impress a lot of people. I have seen reviews saying that, again, this is for horror fans. This is for people who are into that kind of stuff, because maybe to a general audience, some of it may be not necessarily too extreme, but a little out there
Yeah.
for some. But if you are a horror fan and you kind of know the gist of what you're getting into with this kind of a film, then you're gonna love it, from what
Yeah.
I understand. And I'm excited, man. I mean, we are gonna have a jam-packed weekend as far as getting those reviews out for you guys, because like we're seeing something else, and then we're immediately driving home, and then I think it's gonna drop at midnight. I've been trying to find stuff. I can't find a solid answer yet, but I think Prey did.
Yeah.
Either way, I have it worked out, so I don't have to go to work the next day. So we are set. We are good. I will be up. I will stay up all night to get these reviews out for you guys if I have to. So,
We're going to be there. We're going to be consuming a ton of content.
mhm.
And seeing those positive reviews for Hellraiser has really got me pumped for it because, we've been talking about this for a couple months now. High hopes with everyone attached to it. So we didn't really have any reason to think that this was not going to be a positive viewing. But, there's always that potential that it may be bad. But with these reviews, at least, my hopes are still high. Like we talked about in the Hellraiser Splattercast, that those first two films are really great. It kind of gets a little dicey after that, even though I don't think either of us have really seen anything beyond the first two. But that kind of got me inspired for this week's Kill of the Week. Uh,
All righty. So
Um, Go
let
ahead.
us know, Luke. What is our kill of the week? What are we discussing here?
Well, we've had an extensive discussion on Hellraiser during Splattercast and a decent discussion on Hellraiser 2 during that podcast as well, kind of comparing. And I think, we had both mentioned in that podcast that we hadn't seen anything beyond those two. I've seen some of three, I think, and maybe clips of some of the other ones, and they all look terrible. So this week I decided to pick a kill from Hellraiser 3.
Okay, let's take a look at it.
Let's hop into it. And so this is a reporter. I think she becomes the main character because I did watch about 10 minutes of this to kind of get the context of this kill here.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm going in completely blind. I haven't seen any of this. Looks like he's already got the chains on him. These pinhead chains or whatever you want to
Yes.
call them. Is he? I think he's the only
Cenobites.
one that can conjure those. Can't Isn't he?
I
He's
don't
the
know.
main
I
one to
don't know
do
the
it.
lore there 100%. But I would guess so. He's the lead guy.
But
Yep.
no, I mean this. When you showed me this, I initially watched this clip. It does seem to build some decent tension here. But I mean, this is when the gore candy is about to kick in here in a minute, because
Yes.
that's when everything kind of goes
And
off.
this is very jarring because there is nothing gory for the first this happens I think 8 minutes in. So there's really nothing gory at all for those first 8 minutes and then this just all hell breaks loose.
Oh, alrighty. So, yeah, you said she's the reporter right here, and she comes in. This feels very Spider-Man 2 to me, from
Oh,
Sam
there we
Raimi.
go. We got the Doc
That's just
Ock.
kind of where I got. Yeah, like this is what it looks like. I mean,
I
it's
was
the
really
furthest
feeling
thing
Nightmare
from
on
it.
Elm Street vibes for some reason
Oh,
when
I
I
mean, I could totally see that too, just with it like kind of the chains being lifted
yeah.
by nothing. Yeah, and
And we
just a
got the
classic head
exploding head
explosion.
here.
Yeah, I thought it was an interesting choice to have his head charred. I
Yeah.
wonder if that was intentional or if that was just how they had to do the effect.
Now we have her crying with the blood on the wall here. Very gory, very no gore, and then it just turned up to 100 here. The
Hmm.
extreme close up of the blood dripping. I think very intriguing here because the context of this is that she is a reporter in the hospital and supposed to be reporting on the deaths. I can't remember what holiday, if it's the New Year or not. But nothing's really going on, and I think she might be actually leaving after the report there, and then she runs into this guy being wheeled in, and this kind of sets those events in motion because I think I watched maybe the first 15 to 20 minutes of this to kind of get to see where it's going to go after that kill. So yeah, she becomes our main character here.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I think that this is pretty neat. It does make me want to go back and watch number 3,
Yeah,
just because it's like, I think it's like I just need a little bit of bait for some of these, just because like with everything we've got going on, there is such a limited amount of time for
definitely.
us, especially like this past month or so, like through September and now all through October. Time is very limited and precious as far as content to watch, because if I'm not watching something uh you know new in theaters or anything, I'm watching something for the channel.
Yeah,
So it's like, and the only thing that I finally got a little bit of time to catch back up on Game of Thrones yesterday morning. I watched one episode of House of Dragons, which I'm enjoying that. But it's just one of those things where it's like, that's kind of almost like my palate cleanser.
yeah,
And I kind of need it every once in a while, because it's just like, I love horror and I watch horror voluntarily all the time, but it's just one of those things where it's like, I think since the channel's been up and since all this, it's like I go so hard into it now, where it's like I'm always consuming it, like even
yeah.
more so than I would normally. So it's like, but this does get me interested. This does make me feel like, okay, where can I fit Hellraiser 3 in this month to check that out and really see where we're going, especially with the new one coming out. If it's as good as everyone says and I really connect with it, I'll probably end up checking out more of these sequels.
Yeah, and this one I picked because I thought it was interesting here. Like I'm saying, this is 8 minutes in, and I did do only a tiny bit of research in terms of before going into this, just to see kind of what dynamic Hellraiser 3 had. And this is very much where it got picked up by a different studio after, what was it, New World Pictures, I think it was.
I think so.
Had went bankrupt after the first two, so they picked up Hellraiser and the Hellraiser property with the intention of making it more mainstream and not the kind of cult following that it had. So they wanted to amplify those kills. And this one I felt I thought was very intriguing because that kill that we had just seen is very reminiscent of the final kill of Frank in the original Hellraiser.
Yes, yeah,
Happened
with the
8 minutes.
chains and everything.
Yeah,
It's
and this
almost like a
happened,
callback.
and it's like that's such a centerpiece. This happens 8 minutes in. You know, so it's like a very different dynamic where it's like we're taking that big kill that was the centerpiece of that first film, and we're doing it 8 minutes in, and we're moving. You know, so it's like very different
Yeah,
feels here, very
I
different
mean, I
tone.
think that that does become kind of standard for horror fare as you go along, is that they do try to kind of amp that up a little bit. They want to say like, "Oh, we got more going on than those first two."
Yeah,
You see that a lot with some of these films where it's like, as you get later on down in the franchise, I think like part 6 for Friday the 13th, it's what, like 7-8 minutes, and then Jason's ripping someone's heart out. You know what I
yeah,
mean? So it's kind of like, you don't have to wait that long for the gore candy as you go along, which is
yeah.
completely different than like the first Hellraiser, which I get it. They have the opening there with Frank, but they even still keep a lot of that to little bits and parts, and to the
Close up.
shadows for the
And
most part. You don't
yeah,
really get that gore candy until maybe another 15-20 minutes into the film,
yeah.
when he's resurrected. So it's like, the restraint starts to go away. It's very Halloween to Halloween 2,
And
where
in
it's like
this
there was
one,
such a large gap of time between those that you just see the influence of where it's like, okay, now we're going full gore. Which, sorry for cutting you off. Go
oh
ahead.
no, no, you're fine. And this one was very much where we had talked about that those initial ones where Pinhead is around, but he's not really the main focus of anything. You know, he shows up, but more as a residual effect of everything. Whereas in 3, the kind of mandate was we're going to put Pinhead on par with a Jason Voorhees or a Michael Myers, where we want to make him the centerpiece of this film. So you do see him a lot. He's more exposed than what he had been previously. So it's a very much change in tone here into kind of being aligned with kind of what we had seen previously with the other slashers. But I think this came out in 1992. So this is kind of after the wave. This is after the fact almost. So I know what we know now in terms of what Hellraiser has become, before this new remake here, and kind of maybe setting the course back to where it should be. I'm curious if like this was kind of an issue because they're really getting into form in 1992 when this wave has passed almost. So
Hmm.
it's like after that was there really an audience here for this? I mean, I think everyone kind of needed to kind of just relax on it a little bit.
Maybe they thought they could conjure an audience out of it. Maybe they thought like their characters were set aside or a little bit different enough that they could kind of pull those people over. But as we saw, it never really found its footing. I mean, it has
Yeah,
its
never
fans,
got
but
that
it's like,
traction.
yeah, like I would say probably about 80% of these films were all direct to video after two,
Yes.
wasn't it?
Yep. Yeah.
So it's just one of those things where it's like it never really got its due in a sense. So it's just like why this new one's exciting. And you bring up how Pinhead was like the centerpiece here. One of the things that I hear from the reviews of this new film is that the Cenobites are kind of the main focus, and like that's so refreshing and nice to be
Yeah.
having them taken serious in such a serious film.
And to see what
Um,
kind of spin we get on them,
mhm.
if we're gonna dive in depth, because I know they kind of sprinkle the tidbits in, from what I've seen in terms of the other Hellraiser films, especially Pinhead's backstory. But I'm curious to see if we're gonna dive into Chatterer or Mask or any of the other ones and kind of really get that side of the story of things. But why don't we hop into a little closer look of this kill of the week?
Absolutely. So I like when she comes in here again, not having any exposure, but just these wide shots and
Yes,
showing the chains
seeing
attached to
everything.
nothing. Yeah, it's a really an impressive effect. Like that's ultimately what I'm getting here. And then of course they kind of they intentionally are cutting constantly showing you different angles, but really that doesn't look
Past
that
moving.
bad. You could have probably had that in a wide for, you know, most of this scene and I think it would have sold really well.
Yeah, and this one really does feel big. Like we're talking about, like the other films, the first two kind of feel a little more closed off. Where I think the second one gets a little bit bigger toward the end. Where this one, wide shots, we're really going with the effects here. We're showing close-ups of everything. We have the head exploding. We're going to show all of it. We're going to show that gore. So it really sets the tone for something different here. Where it's like if you want to grab your audience, if you're sitting in a theater wondering what you're going to get with Hellraiser 3 and this is the kill you get first, I really feel like that sets a tone of, okay, you have a standard here now that you have to upkeep for the next hour and a half or whatever the length of the film is.
Yeah, and I think that, again, we just said how this franchise kind of lived with direct to DVD. I'm really curious to see if this new one is going to kick into a new franchise where we're kind of going to get to see equal treatment. And I'm just curious to see kind of what the Cenobites are going to do. Are we going to get something to this level of, these kind of intensity when it comes to this kill? Or, is it going to be something completely different? Who knows? I
Yeah,
mean, we're talking about, when did this come out? You said 92, 90
I believe
something?
so. Yeah, I
Yeah,
think it was early
92, and
90s.
now we're talking about 2022. So
Yeah.
could be pretty different, pretty up there. So I'm excited.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad for this course correct here. I do think this kind of does have me a little intrigued to go check out Hellraiser 3 after this, giving it a full look, to see what kind of. I feel like this, if you're gonna dive into another Hellraiser film in terms of that original long-winded franchise, maybe 3 is your best bet because it's closer to the side of quality than a lot of the other ones. So this does have me a little intrigued to see kind of what other kills are in store for that Hellraiser 3.
No, I agree. But alrighty, you want to pay our respects?
I think we do. This dude doesn't even have an actual name, so I just went by what they were calling him in the film. So I think he's a random club punk.
Poor bastard. Never
Uh,
saw it coming. Maybe he did. I don't know. I didn't see
Maybe
the context to it. So
he had died a horrible death in even worse fashion. I mean those I don't know if he had yellow overalls on or something. It was a very unique look for him.
It's the 90s, baby.
Oh
It's
man, he
the
was out partying in the club too.
We're
Right,
getting ready
some
to
little
emulate
nose
his
candy.
favorite Frasier episodes.
Oh man,
So
he missed it. Show's canceled, sir. All right, let's hop into our next segment here with the history of horrors.
Trapped in the Middle Ages.
All right, you primitive screwheads, listen up.
So hopping into it, this is I just want to say before you get into it here, I had not seen this movie until quarantine,
Oh yes.
and this was a wonderful recommendation from you here, Luke.
Oh, and that was a funny story, which we'll get into. So this is on October 2nd. I believe it was 1987. I'm kicking myself. I didn't look up the definitive date, but I believe it was 87 or 88. I don't know 100%. Late 80s is what we'll go with. But this was an October 2nd release, directed by Catherine Bigelow. This is a neo-Western horror film, which there were not many out at that time, and this was a specific kind of idea from Catherine Bigelow to kind of make something like this. And then I did not know this until I was doing research on this. It's a remake was planned in 2006, but had been put on hold in 2008 when they felt that it was too similar to the Twilight series. So I don't know how that works, but
Yeah,
apparently
no, like what? There's a central romance. Is that
I
really
have no
it?
clue. I really don't know, but I think that does attribute
Furthest thing
to
from it.
the Blu-ray release. And I was gonna say that this was a funny story because I had been looking for this film and very expensive. If you don't know, I'm assuming a lot of people that are listening to this do know that this is not an easy find in terms of a physical copy. I had decided to go on a long journey to find this, and Dylan was working at a used media store at the time, and I was like, "There's no way." I went in there. I believe you had the Jason Takes Manhattan the poster that was
Yes,
like
we
"I
had
love
just
New
gotten
York."
a yeah, we had just gotten a bunch of horror merch traded in from a local guy who, was a huge collector. He was just selling off a lot of his collection to get new stuff. And yeah, there so you were in a couple times that week, I
Yeah,
believe.
and I
So
believe that wasn't that near Halloween time because
it was getting close. It was like
yeah,
it was end of August, I think.
okay, because it was very cold and rainy out, and I remember stopping up there and
Might have been September. Might have been.
Um, and I was looking at stuff, and you were standing there, and I was like, "There's no way you guys would have Near Dark in any of your stores." And I don't think you knew what it was at the time.
Mm.
And then you went and checked, and you're like, "No, we do have it," and you got a little discount on it. And I was able to snag that one for a tremendous price for that time. I think you even told me that it was still expensive, and you're
Mhm.
like, "It. I can use my discount, but it's going to be this price." And I think you thought I wasn't going to want it, but it was such a good price for what it would be that I was like, I definitely need it.
It was something like it was like $60, I think it was, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And then my discount at the time, I think, brought it down to like 40 something.
Yeah.
Maybe closer to like the high 40s, almost 50. But yeah, no, I remember that one because I had ordered it and the store never sent it out. And so you asked about it like a week later, and I was like, yeah, it's weird. Why didn't that come out? And I was just like, hey, did you guys ever send that out? And they're like, oh shit. Yeah, no, here we're sending it now. So it was like delayed by another week. So I was worried that maybe they had lost it or something, because it was just like, oh shit. Like I knew you seemed excited about it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that was what, like, God, was that maybe was that 2018 or 2019 when
I
you got
believe it's
that?
2019, but I don't know 100%. Oh, it could have been 2018. I don't know. One of those years. It was definitely prior to the pandemic.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't know 100%. Could have been 18 actually. Now I think about it. But the cover of that is very based on. They have an original cover for the DVD, but the Blu-ray cover is a take on Twilight. So it
Mhm.
looks very much like a Twilight film, and now it makes more sense, especially if that remake was put on hold because they felt like there were a similarity between Twilight and Near Dark in some fashion. I don't know how that works, but it makes more sense to kind of poke fun at that with that Blu-ray cover release.
Yeah, I guess. I really hope that didn't pigeonhole things. I mean, this movie doesn't need remade, but that to me just seems like you obviously don't understand the content you're working with then if you're going to say that this is anything like Twilight. I mean, like I said, the main character falls for, a lead, another lead, his co-lead, and they have like a romance to it, but there's so much more going on in this
Yeah.
movie.
It's a very unique kind of vampire story that
It
I don't think you've
is.
seen since, to be honest.
No, and I mean it's got fucking amazing performances from like Lance Henriksen, Bill Paxton. I mean, this entire cast really kills it, and I just think the iconic bar scene in this, I mean, is unbeatable.
Yeah.
I absolutely fucking love that.
I mean, there's so many, like you said, the cast, the characters in this are just on another level where you can watch it and almost resonate with any of them. It's like they can all be your favorite every different viewing. Because there's something that kind of unique about each one, which is kind of hard to do. And I think the concept overall is a lot of fun. I think this is kind of where it falls in line where you have Lost Boys, you have Fright Night, but then Near Dark typically tends to be a lot of people's favorite vampire film. And I remember talking, someone had asked a question, and I can't remember who it was. It was a producer, I believe. I'm forgetting the gentleman's name. He's also on the Mick Garris podcast. Russo. Is it Joe Russo, maybe?
Might be.
Anyway, he had asked about best horror film or vampire film, and they kind of got into the discussion of Lost Boys, Fright Night, and Near Dark. And for me, I kind of had put, I replied and said, Near Dark felt like um, that kind of offbeat club where only certain people knew the secret password to, because it just felt like, especially for years, that no one really knew of Near Dark. And then now it's kind of lived this life on social media where it's like, hey, have you seen Near Dark? And then, it gets exposed, which is great. But for the longest time, it felt like this secret cult club of, it wasn't anywhere. You had to buy it physically. And a lot of people were not privy to Near Dark at all. So it's great, it's living a second life, but it was very niche at the time, very different. And I think that will always be remembered that way.
Yeah, and I think that this would be prime for some Scream Factory attention or
Absolutely.
Vinegar Syndrome or somebody to come out and upscale this and give it a proper Blu-ray release.
If we ever got a 4K.
No, we never got a 4K.
No, I said
I
if
mean,
we ever did.
oh, if we ever did. I was like, no, we don't even have an official like Blu-ray that's still in print. So it's like, yeah, that it would be. It's one of those movies that's on the wish list for sure of things I want to see get upgraded.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I don't even know if there's any extras on the Near Dark Blu-ray. I'm gonna have to take a look, but I know the time has passed now. Even if we do get a release, I really would have loved to hear Bill Paxton's take on this film. I think that would have been tremendous. Even back then, I absolutely would have loathed a remake, no matter who was attached to it. To be honest, and I know they always have roundabout ways, especially bringing back like supernatural characters like vampires. If we would have gotten like just Bill Paxton a solo film, bringing his character back and just expanding the Near Dark universe, it would have been tremendous.
Give you a requel in sense,
Yes.
and have that come back, your favorite term. It's like, yeah, I really don't know where you'd go with it nowadays, but I do want to see more from this universe. I do. Or at least, give us a vampire flick that's similar in tone to this, because I think that
give us
this
something different.
really strikes a unique balance. And I think that like, because the thing about it too is like the vampires aren't really seen as bad guys. Like they are, but you spend so much time with them and you see the family dynamic that you just end up really enjoying them too.
Yeah.
So it's really quite it's a movie that kind of has you pulled in a few different directions, and it's great. I mean, I fucking love Catherine Bigelow also. I mean, with Point Break and her work with like Zero Dark 30 and all that, like she's really a fantastic filmmaker.
Yeah.
And it's so crazy to think that this is where she got her start.
Yeah, to see all her credentials nowadays, and to think, I think this was maybe her first solo venture. I don't know 100% because I didn't deep dive into this before, putting on the history of horrors. But for this to kind of be a point of something that she wanted to do, where I think she was living in that transitional period where I talk about a lot of filmmakers today have that love for horror, which you didn't see. Kind of horror used to be that kind of means to an end in terms of lower budget things to get into, and then maybe work your way into a different genre. Where it's funny to see Catherine Bigelow, who's highly regarded, make it a point that she wanted to make some sort of neo-Western vampire flick that hadn't been told before. And I mean, like, when you get results of someone who loves something, who's a quality filmmaker, you get a film that lives forever, and that's what Near Dark is. It's always on any horror fan's recommendation list for people to check out. Vampire or not, this is an essential viewing for any horror fan.
No, I would agree. And I think that, ultimately, if you haven't seen this movie, do yourself a favor. I know it's going to be tough to find. But what you can do is, I own the film on my Vudu account, because it was available on, was it DVD UPC for disc to
Yes.
digital a couple of years ago. I have no idea if it's still up now.
I think
But
it still is, but
I
don't know.
got it for, I think it was one of those ones where you pay, because they're usually about $2.
Yeah.
You pay a little more for this one. I think it was $5, and you only get it in standard definition. But I mean, you're gonna have a hard time finding this
Yeah.
any other way.
I know it does pop up on Shudder,
Mhm.
a few odd months of the year. I think it had just been on Shudder, but then they take it down. So I don't know if it's still running for the month of October. I think it was maybe in September, but it pops in and off on there as well. But I don't really think it pops up on any other streaming services other than Shudder.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's one of those ones where it's like, when you do see it, and you have the opportunity to watch it, please do, because it is well worth your time. One of the best vampire flicks there is.
Without question. But talking about vampires, that kind of gets us into the actual format of the Sunday Scary. So why don't we hop into it?
100%.
We've been Lost Boys in the 80s, spent from dusk till dawn with them in the 90s, and even drank from a chalice with them during a midnight mass last year. It is time to go back to one of the earliest tales that is 100 years old. Nosferatu is slated to be getting a remake, with director Robert Eggers bringing his new take on the Transylvania native. Already attached to the project are Bill Skarsgård and Lily Rose Depp to star. The film has been being pieced together since 2017 and has fallen apart twice in the past. But with this news, the project hasn't seen a stake through the heart just yet. Will this be another iconic film in Eggers' already all-star filmography, which this guy is a favorite of the podcast? I will say, I think me and you both love his films. I haven't seen The Northmen yet, just because I think I wanted to see it, and then it popped up on Peacock, and we were putting this crazy podcast back together. So I had to start prepping for a lot of different things, and have not got around to watching The Northman, but it is on my viewing list. Probably not till November, though.
Okay, so yes, you need to see The Northmen. My wife and I got a chance to go to an advanced screening of it to check it out. It's fucking incredible. It is, if you're talking, taking the horror out of it all, and just talking movies I've seen this year, it's probably my favorite film of the year still. It was just such a wonderful experience. Nothing like it. The dude's a true master. I mean, Robert Eggers, like, just from watching The Witch, you kind of got that sense. And then The Lighthouse comes out, and that is just incredible. This period piece, dare I say, near Lovecraftian type horror. And then you get this excellent revenge story told with a Viking backdrop that has some of this surrealist energy. I think the third act of this film is like without spoiling anything for you, it feels very much like Star Wars Episode 3,
Okay.
but like turned up to 11 and like with actual violence, and it is fucking insane.
I'm intrigued. It is definitely on my watch list. Okay, out of that, because you've seen them all. I've seen The Witch and The Lighthouse. Would you say that Northman is the strongest out of the three so far, or because I know you're a huge fan of The Lighthouse, but I know you're a huge fan of The Witch. So
It's so tough, dude. You're asking me to pick between my children here at this point. Like, I love this man's filmography. Of all of the modern up and coming directors, Between him and Ari Aster, they're just some of my all-time favorites. Like, I think that Ari Aster's both of his films have been fantastic. He's 2 for 2 right now for me, because I mean, Midsummer I absolutely adore as well, but it's one of those things where it's like this. I don't know, man. It could
Don't know.
switch day to day. I mean, I'm gonna say The Lighthouse is my definitive favorite
Okay.
still. But like, I mean, you catch me on the right day, I could say The Northmen. You catch me on the another day, I could say The Witch. I think that just the dude has a level of quality, and he's making movies that other people aren't making right now.
Yeah,
And so it makes it so hard to pick.
and like for me, I would say The Lighthouse is probably my favorite out of the two that I've seen from him. And that's what gets me excited, as you're saying, like he's so different than any of these other filmmakers, where it's like looking at this Nosferatu and I can be like, oh well, The Lighthouse as a reference point gets me excited for this. But then I'm like, oh wait, The Witch as well as a reference point gets me excited for this. So it's like this being something, a passion project for him, because this isn't like a hey, just a recent thing. Like I said, it's been since 2017. He's had ideas. He's been wanting to put this together. And to know the films that he's made that are absolutely in line for something would become very unique. I'm extremely excited for this. And to be like, we had that whole discussion on reboots and remakes, and it's always give me a reason. This film came out in 1922. So it's like we're 100 years deep right now. So it's like there is a reason here for this to be remade and brought to a more current audience. And I think Robert Eggers, you can't have a better choice to tackle the subject matter. I think like he's going to put his own spin on this. It's going to feel like Robert Eggers, but it's also going to be true to form. So it's like when you're picking someone to remake Nosferatu, Robert Eggers is your number one draft pick.
100%. And I mean, it's just, oh God, talking about this, he is the perfect fit for this material. Another adaptation I'd love to see him get his hands on, if he wants to do it, would be doing a not a Universal Monsters take, but a Mary Shelley adaptation of Frankenstein.
Yeah.
Just knowing that original source material and just how different it is from the Universal Monsters one that we got. I think that he'd be ripe for that as well. But this, when I first heard about this, because I caught wind of this just after I saw The Witch. And I loved it. The Witch is still one of my favorite theater experiences ever, because I went there and the theater was relatively full. It wasn't packed, but there was a good solid group of people for it. And that movie ends, and everybody I went with was just like, that was fucking terrible. Like, what did you bring me to? Why did we see this? And I'm just walking out of there like, I fucking adored that, guys. I thought that was amazing.
Was that
So
more the beginnings of the A24 kind of
it
horror
was, yeah.
venture? Okay.
That was 2015, 26.
Okay.
It might have been 2015 when that came out, or spring of 2016. But no, I fucking loved that movie when I first saw it. And it's like, it's fun. Yeah, that was 2015.
Okay.
So it's so funny to me now that, like, and what's really great is some of those people that I went and saw that with, they were so my good friends. They have gone back and watched that movie again, and they now appreciate it a lot more.
Yeah.
And they really enjoyed the Lighthouse. The Lighthouse is good too, but the Lighthouse, and I don't know if they've seen the Northmen yet, but I know I'll get them to sit down and watch it at some point. But yeah, it's just this material. Nosferatu is the perfect thing for Eggers to tackle. I think this is right up his wheelhouse. It's got that gothic kind of horror aspect to it, and it's obviously a passion project. So I say let the dude do what he wants. And I think that the only thing that was kind of weird to me, so and this was just rumors, but there were rumors after The Lighthouse came out that he was going to use Willem Dafoe to play Nosferatu. Clearly, we now know that it's going to be Bill Skarsgård, which is funny because he already worked with one Skarsgård brother. Now he's working with another, which I think is great casting in itself. I mean, like, the dude's creepy as hell. We just talked about him in Barbarian.
Yeah.
Great actor. However I feel about the It movies, he was great. So it's just one of those things where it's like he's going to embody this perfectly. I have no doubt. But it was one of those things where it's like I had a fan casting in mind, and now I'm just a little bit like, okay, well, I'll let that go. But I trust Robert Eggers. If he feels like this is the best thing, then go for it.
Yeah. And I fully think that Bill Skarsgård will knock this one out of the park. I find some of his Pennywise stuff a little over exaggerated. But overall, I think he was a competent Pennywise. And, he does have those facial expressions down. I'm curious to see, because going into this and looking at Eggers' body of work here, where the Nightlight was black and white, and Nosferatu, the original, is black and white. So it's like, does he go that route? Does he make it his own and do something in color? And he's a guy where I don't necessarily see it going like a silent film route, but I'm curious to see what kind of spin he puts on that. If it's very sparing in like actual dialogue, and it's more tension built and us viewing that kind of aspect of it, because I feel like he's the guy that can pull that off. Like I said, I don't think it'll go like pure silent film. I don't think he's there with that. But I'm curious to see what kind of unique take that he's going to spin on it, because it's like I could see this in black and white, but I'm also very intrigued to see him do a color aspect of this, just to kind of differentiate, especially if we're going to go over 100 years from that original, just to kind of see how far we've come in terms of filmmaking. I think Robert Eggers can really put on a showcase visually with that. So I can see it black and white, but I would be really intrigued to see Robert Eggers take this on in full color to kind of I don't want it to be like Wes Anderson-esque. We've seen it kind of where they filled in the color for The Lighthouse and stuff like that, where it's I don't want this to be like vibrant or anything like that, but like to kind of have that gothic tone, maybe a little darker, but still in color. I'd be intrigued to see what he can do visually with it.
I agree. I think that, the film nerd in me is screaming right now that I want it to be in 4:3 aspect ratio, just like The Lighthouse was. But then again, it is one of those things where it's like, I don't know if he would do that, because he likes to change it up a little bit. And I mean, The Witch is already an example of, him being able to use color and set things in the past and them still look beautiful. You could say the same thing about like the Northmen, but I think that's just on a different level in what we're talking here. But it's just going to depend on how he wants to go with it. If he feels like he wants to harken back to the 22 film and go from there, then like that's fine, that's great, he can do it. But I don't know, I feel like he's a director who constantly wants to challenge himself, so he might do something completely different. Who knows? Maybe it'll be a found footage movie. I don't know. I doubt that, but
we'll see what happens. I mean, he's got a whole shed full of tools, and we're talking like this is going to be his fourth film. In like I mentioned, all-star filmography, where he hasn't missed yet. Where you're talking about The Witch and going into that, where it's like I look at Wes Anderson films, I'm like, visually it's a feast for me. It's very vibrant, very different. But I'm also looking at The Witch, and I'm like, visually that's a feast for me in a different way than a Wes Anderson film is, because there are so many things where especially when we're talking about creating our own unique properties and how you would film it and things like that, I find myself always saying like The Witch. It's like the tone of The Witch visually. So it's like one of those things where if we're looking at Nosferatu, the original has lived on with horror fans throughout history. I mean, we're still talking about today 100 years later. Whereas if we're looking for a filmmaker to make something that's going to withstand another 100 years, I honestly believe Robert Eggers is the guy to do it. I can easily see this being studied.
It could very much become a definitive version of this film to stand up there with the original. And I think that, like I said, if he was to do another kind of roundabout into this, he would be the guy for Mary Shelley's Frankenstein adaptation.
Yeah.
Because I think he would be able to, like, just knowing that story, because that's a recent one for me that, like, I'd always known of the Universal story and how they broke that down, but like just kind of actually getting into the minutia and how the actual story was told, it's completely different. And it is shockingly different. And I think that it's just one of those things where it's like, I never saw Kenneth Branagh movie, but I hear that it doesn't quite reach that point. And I don't know of any other adaptations that really do. So it's just like when I was like listening and just kind of understanding what the story was, and like I listened to like a big hour-long synopsis of it. And it's just one of those things where I'm like, God damn, like Robert Eggers would be fucking perfect for this.
Yeah.
And I only really thought that because I was under the assumption that Nosferatu was still dead in the water. And when I saw that article this week, I sent it to you because I was just like, we are fucking talking about this, because any excuse we can to talk about this guy, like his work will be on the Splattercast at some point, but like we're just, again, we'll get there.
Yeah, we're a little inundated and overflooded with certain things we've got to touch on. But like looking at the kind of actual story work here, where this is based off of Dracula, and I have it sitting back there on my shelf, where it's a thick book, So it depending on where he wants to go with the storytelling here, it is a decent amount of an ask for your audience to sit through that. But I feel like Robert Eggers is one of those guys that can ask that from an audience, and we're okay with sitting there for 2+ hours to kind of listen to the story that he wants to be told, because there is a payoff there. And again, it's such an experience in the theater. I mean, The Lighthouse still sits with me. Going to see that in the theater, I think I drove to Canton because that was the only spot that was seeing it, and it was just like well worth the experience in the theater to see this film. So it's like I'm very intrigued to see what he's going to do with Nosferatu. I know it's going to be very unique, as opposed to a run of the mill kind of vampire story, where I know we were just talking about Near Dark and how that's a unique story. I mean, Lost Boys is a different kind of story. From Dusk Till Dawn is a different kind of story. Midnight Mass is a different kind of story. But I'm really looking forward to kind of getting to that kind of basic root of the story where this all kind of emulated from. And I'm intrigued to see Robert Eggers' take on it. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Absolutely. I agree with you. And we will definitely be keeping you guys posted when more news for this strikes out, especially whenever we get that first trailer. I'm sure we'll have like a 2-hour long discussion about it.
I'm sure we can't get enough of it.
Absolutely.
All right, let's hop into our next bit of news. Naughty Dog fans were given a little treat this past week with the release of one of its top gaming properties. The trailer for the TV series adaptation of The Last of Us finally dropped, and a much anticipated look at what is in store for fans for the gaming property. Starring Pedro Pascal as Joel and Bella Ramsey as Ellie, and written by Chernobyl creator Craig Mazin, the series already shows it is being handled with more effort than a lot of video game to film or TV properties. With the series being dropped on HBO and HBO Max in 2023, there is still time for fans to sour on the adaptation as more information gets released. Is this going to be a video game franchise that will be successfully adapted, or will this have fans wanting to hit the restart button? Dylan, I'm going to let you take this one because I know you are a huge fan of the Last of Us gaming franchise.
I do really like these games. I think it's like this and God of War and Spider-Man are probably my 3 big ones on the PlayStation.
I'm a zombies eat my neighbors kind of guy.
There you go. So yeah, you don't play video games much. You have a very funny relationship with video games that I always like to bring up whenever we can, is how you will buy games with the intent of playing them, and then like you'll maybe play like an hour of them, and you'll take it out, you put it on the shelf, and you'll never fucking touch it again. And I was like that too for a long time. But yeah, I finally, I think it was the pandemic is what kind of broke that barrier for me.
Yeah.
Where it's like I had all that time. So I started going back and playing some of these games finally.
And The Last of Us was a game that I owned. And I played about an hour of it. And nothing wrong with the game at all. I just never went back to it. I've watched a few, never fully the playthroughs, but I've watched some of the playthroughs on this thing. It's a very unique kind of game, very cinematic. If we're talking about an adaptation, this is a perfect one. Another one for me would have been Uncharted, which did happen. I haven't seen the movie, but I heard it was not great. So I'm really intrigued by this one. I did see the trailer. I think it's great casting. I think it's a lot of fun looking. I think they really nailed the world down. Again, I haven't lived in that world a lot because I've only played the game for about an hour, but I'm really intrigued to see what is in store in terms of kind of bringing the game elements into the actual TV series itself.
Yeah, so going into it, I really enjoyed the first game. I never owned a PlayStation 3, so I didn't get to hop onto it when it first came out. But it was one of those things where I was like, it always lived in infamy for me. As one of those things where it's like, I'm gonna have to play this at some point. And so when I got a PS4, the remake, or like I guess remake is the best way to put it, had come out, and I absolutely adored it. I thought it was a really great story, really fun, gameplay, really intense. But it was just one of those ones too where I was just like, yeah, it was good. I really didn't fall in love with this series until Last of Us 2, which I know I'm gonna get some people who think I'm absolutely batshit crazy and that I am a shill and all this stuff, but I thought Last of Us 2 was excellent. I felt like I was watching a really good season of a TV show, playing through that for a week. And I really got invested in these characters, every twist, every turn. I was so into it. And I know that a lot of people got upset with some of the choices that game made with certain characters, but all I can say is that it worked for me.
Yeah.
I was just as invested in those characters as any major Last of Us fan is. And it hurt with what happened. And I mean, I'm not going to sit here and spoil it because it's only a couple of years old. But it was one of those things where it's like, okay, well, that was ballsy. Now show me, what are you going to do with the story from here on out? And it's a really emotional fucking story. And I think the first one's an emotional ride too. But the second one to me is, I think, and this is going to really trip people out, but I'm going to say that the second one is kind of like the Dark Knight to me.
Yeah.
Not at all in the storytelling aspect, but just that feeling to where it's like, I like the first one, but I really like the second one. So this, series coming out, like I've been very positive about it. I think that it's going to be pretty good. I love Pedro Pascal. I think the cast is really strong. And with it being a series, I'm very curious to see how it's going to go, because I think, like, we've had a lot of film adaptations for video games, but I can't think of many series. I know
Yeah.
we had the recent Resident Evil, which apparently didn't pan out very well. Early reviews were saying that it was pretty good, but I guess that didn't really stick with the general audience. I know we
That
were
ship
going to talk
sailed in
about it
the
at some
night.
point, and it just kind of slipped by. But it's just one of those things where it's just like, yeah, I think that this has a shot. Um, and I'm curious to see what they do with it.
Yeah.
I hope that it survives. I don't think, going, depending on how they take this, there's a lot of similar imagery from the first. Maybe this season is just like the first like couple hours of the game, and then you can go into the second season where maybe you finish the first game. I don't know if you really want to, because with what happens, I don't think you want to jump into season 2 and then follow in the footsteps of the second game,
Yeah.
because that's going to kind of really shake things up a little too much. It's different with a video game to a TV show. I think maybe you try to go 2 or 3 seasons before you do that.
Yeah.
Just my opinion.
Yeah, and like you're saying, we haven't really seen that adaptation in terms of a TV series. Now, one of the things I kind of want to bring up here is I'm not really privy to the game as well here. Now, do you want that to live verbatim through the game, or like kind of looking at we'll talk Walking Dead for a minute, where I've seen some of the comics, haven't, but I know that varies in terms of the TV show and the comic, where they went off in their own way for a little bit. Now, let's say that first season's 10 episodes. I don't really know what it is. Let's say it's 10 episode. It really hits kind of closer to how the original source material, the video game, goes. Maybe we don't even get that conclusion of what we do with the first video game. Now, do you want to see it continue in the route of how the games went, or would you prefer, let's say we sign all the characters on for 5 seasons? You just want to see it go in its own way. Maybe by the 5th season, at the end, we get to whatever happens in The Last of Us 2. Or do you want it kind of verbatim to kind of see? Let's do game to TV series complete adaptation?
So and I just double checked this, so I was right. The timeline is 5 years between Last of Us 1 and 2.
Okay.
So there is a lot of room that they could play and kind of make their own story there. Neil Druckmann, the original creator of Last of Us, is still on board for this. He directs one episode of the show, I know, but he's also a writer on this. So it's like they could really flesh out this relationship. And yeah, I think that you could go maybe 3 or 4 seasons before you get into the events of Last of Us 2.
Yeah.
And the game series, from what I understand, is still going. There's still intentions of completing this trilogy, which I absolutely want to see. So it's kind of one of those things where I'm just like, let's kind of feel this out. Let's maybe take 2 seasons to do the first game, and then maybe 2 more seasons to tell the story in between that, because that's stuff we've never seen.
Yeah.
As far as I know, there isn't any DLC or anything that shows what happens between Last of Us 1 and 2. So it's like let's see those couple years in between that, and then let's get into Last of Us 2. The other thing that I wanted to say that I was really happy to see that looks great. We only see them for a second, but the clickers look awesome. They really, the effects look good. They look practical, and they look really creepy and scary, just like how they're supposed to. So yeah,
I like the
I think
audio
this is,
of it.
the audio in the game is terrifying. These are my headphones that I use whenever I'm gaming. So it's like the sound in these playing Last of Us 2. There's next time you come over to my house, I have to boot up Last of Us 2 and have you play one specific section. And you're gonna feel like you're in the thing. I swear to God, like it's such a great sequence in Last of Us 2. And it is terrifying and awesome, but the sound design in that specific section, it'll really get you.
Yeah, and I'm pretty excited about this, especially like where you're saying kind of that source material. If you're saying anything is reminiscent of the thing, I'm going to be on board for it. And I like hearing that that's kind of the tone that they go for a little bit, because looking at this, what you said, Neil Druckmann is a creator of the game and attached in terms of writing, which what stuck out to me most is Craig Mazin, because I listened to the Script Notes podcast with John August and Craig Mazin, and both masterminds in terms of script writing. I think if you're a budding screenwriter, absolutely listen to a lot of their takes. I think they're great. And he was responsible for the Chernobyl limited series, and which was highly regarded. Now, this is going to be very different because, that was based on an actual event, where this one's kind of, we're going to get to see more of his kind of fictional side of things. And I know he's such a complete screenwriter from my perspective that I'm very intrigued to, especially I know he's a huge fan of the video game because he's talked about it on the podcast a lot before it was even announced, and then after it was announced, to know that he's going to he's easily handling this with care from his perspective, and trying to be true to the game and pleasing a lot of the original audience there that's from the game. And to know that kind of we have that support from the creator of the game as well, it makes me all that more intrigued, because I know that writing is going to be handled appropriately from the actual source material. So I'm really intrigued to see how they're going to translate it. And like you're saying, I didn't know that there was a 5-year gap there, which again intrigues me even more, because it does feel like maybe that first season is more so we're going to tackle the main themes of that game, but then we're going to have our own room to play once we get there, So it's like we have the beginning, we have the end. Now let's fill in the middle with our kind of creative input as to where we want to take the story.
Yeah, I really have high hopes for this. I would love to see it succeed and do really well. Again, I think they have a lot of great casting in this, because there's also another person I want to highlight would be Nick Offerman comes in and he plays a character in this. And I think that also Gabriel Luna, I think it's Gabriel. Yeah, it's Gabriel Luna. He was for a movie I wasn't huge on, but I did like his interpretation of the character Terminator Dark Fate. He was the Rev 9 in that, and I think he builds a lot of a great presence within himself and everything. So I'm very excited to see that. And then I'm also just running through this real quick. I was surprised to see that Troy Baker He's also in this. It says for 2 episodes.
Oh yeah, I
So
haven't even dove in. I mean, I looked at the very basic form of the cast. I didn't even know that like half these people you're mentioning are actually in this.
yeah, and you know who Troy Baker is?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, so yeah, that's pretty great. Having the OG come in, and even if it's just a
Yeah.
bit part, it's like it's still real recognized as real there. So I do have high hopes for this. I want this to be really good. I want this to work. Um, but only time is gonna tell. I think that overall, with video game adaptations, we really haven't gotten anything that's incredible, in my opinion, like that really breaks that mold. I've kind of been saying it for a while now that I'm starting to think that maybe we should just let video games be video games because clearly they work in the medium that they are. Um, Another one that people are kind of throwing around that I'm kind of iffy on is a God of War adaptation. And I just don't know if they'd be able to, like, this is very much a doable series in the sense
Yeah.
of it's post-apocalyptic. We're not talking about gods and all these bombastic fucking fight scenes and everything. It's more about the characters and their struggles and the drama between them. And I just don't see how you could do a God of War justice, like, because those games are so visceral, and those fight scenes are incredible. You would need end game level money
Yeah.
to even
Consistently.
get that. Yeah, and I just don't know if you could do that for a TV series.
Yeah.
I mean,
And if you don't, it would be dated so quick that it wouldn't even be enjoyable in a year, even if it's enjoyable to begin with. So
mm,
I think that would just be such a big undertaking, and I don't think that would resonate with a general audience. Because some people get loose in that kind of content, whereas The Last of Us is, I mean, it's basic storytelling. It's kind of more so relatable. Everyone talks about post-apocalyptic stuff, so it's kind of like an audience can kind of relate to that. I mean, we talked The Walking Dead was such a big pop culture overtaking for years, where it's like
mhm.
I think this is something that could fill that gap, even in terms of even a higher quality. So I'm intrigued to see where they go. That trailer did get me excited for what they're going to present to us. I don't think this has a definitive release date other than 2023. I didn't see one when I was looking things up, so
Yeah, I'm not
uh,
seeing one here either.
I don't know when it's going to be dropped, but I will be anticipating this one for certain.
Oh yeah, and I think that there's enough interest from us here that you'll probably good chance you'll see this on primetime terrors from
Oh, without
us. I
question.
think this would, depending on where we're at as far as series go and what we're in the midst of, this would definitely be a good one for that.
Oh,
I
this could be
think
a
there's
lot of
enough
fun.
interest from us, and I'm definitely going to be watching at least the first season to
Yeah.
really sit with it before I make my decision on whether it's worth going forward with or not.
Oh, well, to be continued. We'll put a pin in this one
Mhm.
until we actually see a full episode.
Oh yeah.
All right. Our next topic here, from demonic zombies to scientists that have no skin. Sam Raimi has covered it all in the horror genre. But now he could be adding a murderous ventriloquist dummy to his army of darkness. It was reported by producer Roy Lee that he was working on a remake of Magic, the 1978 film, with Raimi directing the film this time around. That has since been rectified, as Raimi's team has said he is not attached. The whirlwind of back and forth news has gotten the horror community talking about a potential remake in the works. Is Magic ready for a remake? And would Raimi be the choice to direct? Now, Dylan, you have not seen Magic. I don't. Were you privy to this before this news?
I knew the film existed.
Okay.
And I knew it was Anthony Hopkins, and I knew it was held in pretty high regard.
Yeah, so it is a kind of more obscure, I would say, in terms of people actually going out and watching this. Now, it wasn't widely available. I actually had watched this first on the Sony streaming service Crackle, which was the only spot that I could find it. It's since now on Tubi, and I think maybe one other streaming service. I don't know 100% which one it is. But now it's kind of more widely accessible to people in a higher quality, because sometimes Crackle's kind of that really kind of grainy SD stuff. But this one, you can watch it on Tubi. I did turn it on earlier this week just to kind of brush up on it a little bit. And high quality stuff. I recommend going to check it out. It is Anthony Hopkins is like a budding, I guess you'd say, magician slash ventriloquist. He has his dummy named Fats is part of his bit, and he carries Fats around even when he's not on stage, and it's almost this dueling kind of um, bit even throughout his life, which is a very unique kind of concept, very different. There's one particular scene with these two and Burgess Meredith where very intriguing in terms of the kind of how the dynamic that Anthony Hopkins is able to pull off with this. Very different. Great acting. I mean, you already see it. We know what Anthony Hopkins would become, but to see it in 1978 and him a little bit younger than that, than we're used to, you see just kind of the level of acting coming from him. This very different kind of film. I highly recommend it. Very psychological in terms of what you're going to be looking for and not what you think maybe you're going to be seeing. But this one, in terms of a remake, I'm intrigued to see where this would go. I don't know if Raimi, I could see doing it easily, but he wouldn't have been like the person that jumped out at me, because this isn't an Evil Dead. This isn't a Multiverse of Madness or a Darkman or anything like that. This is very more psychological than anything, not really supernatural.
So a little bit more grounded than, like you
Yes.
said, supernatural to it. So the concept does intrigue me. I do enjoy hearing that it is more of a a non-supernatural take on it.
Yeah.
And definitely more of like he's got some issues that he's trying to work through. And it's interesting. I definitely think you're coming back to material, anything from the 70s. I like to think that when you have a concept like this, it's probably going to be pretty unique and it's going to
Yeah.
be pretty out there. So it's like, I think that coming back to this for a remake, this does sound like something that isn't on a lot of people's radars. And from what you're saying, it probably should be. But it is one of those things where it's like, it's probably is one of those titles. It's pretty ripe for a retelling or an
Yeah.
updated story to it. So with that said, I would definitely be interested in checking this out. But it is one of those things too, where it's like, if you're saying Sam Raimi isn't a good fit for it, who do you think would be a good fit for this kind of
That one,
material?
I don't know specifically who I think could undertake this kind of film. Honestly, it would feel like, if we're talking about like a production company or anything like that, it really would feel like an A24 kind of film, because it would be in line with the things that they're doing. I just don't know. Someone who would be a little more grounded for me, I would say. Well, Ari Aster would not be a bad choice in terms of that. Would be his take on that could be very intriguing, especially kind of like you're saying, this being a 78 film where you can really do something different here. And where this film goes, it's very secluded for the most part. It doesn't really where you can take this film, it doesn't go all over the place. So there is a lot of more story to be told here, I think. So I could see him taking this on. I did have like watching this and seeing Anthony Hopkins's performance in terms of maybe more current day things. An actor that had jumped out at me who may undertake this, where we haven't really seen this kind of side, would be Paul Rudd, because he is so likable and kind of has that comedy background. I would really love to see him. Like, in my opinion, a lot of comedy actors are at such the highest form because it's hard to make people laugh. So like looking at Adam Sandler and Uncut Gems, where he's able to lose himself in that role of almost being like an unlikable asshole. I really think Paul Rudd would have those chops to kind of dive into maybe more of a psychological horror, and we haven't seen that from him. And especially, how would people take that? Would it be like a Jim Carrey and the Cable Guy, where we're not ready to see someone we love like that dive into like a darker kind of aspect? But I think that could raise a lot of very interesting kind of scenes, and just kind of that overall acting ability from Paul Rudd would be very intriguing.
Yeah, I think that's a good pick. I like that. Paul Rudd in anything. I think that he's a very versatile actor. There was a show with him that came out a couple years ago. This was pre-pandemic. My wife and I watched it in like a day. I forget what it was called though.
I'm blanking as well.
But you
I
know
what
what
you're
I'm
talking
talking about, where he
Yes,
plays
100%.
two roles.
Yep.
That was awesome, and it showed a little bit more of his dramatic side.
Yeah.
And I always love when he does that, because it's just one of those things where it's like he's a great, he's a very versatile actor, and I think that he's a really great fit for like material like this, where you're saying that it's a psychological kind of take on something where it's you lean away from the supernatural stuff, you just let him play within his head. And I think that he'd be an excellent fit for this material. I like that pick, and I'm not familiar with the material, of course, but just from what you're describing and everything, I could see it now. And I like Ari Aster. I like that as a pick. I mean, I think he's a great dude. But it is one of those things too where, so does this have elements of comedy to it in any sense of the way, or is it pretty
No.
straightforward?
I mean, like, this is being a 1978 film. There's kind of like very Joaquin Phoenix in Joker, where he's on stage doing, where there's a very specific scene at the beginning, so I'm not really going to spoil anything, because you'll see it as you're being introduced to the character. He's telling, I don't know if it's his relation, I'm assuming so. I don't know if they dive into it. I can't remember 100%. He's telling this guy who's in a hospital bed about his bit and how everyone was laughing and stuff as they're cutting to the bit and no one is laughing. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like where Joaquin Phoenix is up there thinking he knocked it out of the park, and you really cut to it's a horrible, horrible circumstance for him. So there's that kind of 1978 jokey kind of, tongue-in-cheek, basic A to B comedy, but that's only on stage stuff. Everything else is very much straightforward. Almost like when you watch the dynamic of Anthony Hopkins and this ventriloquist dummy, and when you're understanding what he's doing, it's almost disturbing. Very different stuff. It's not a comedy at all. Very straight, I would say, psychological. You could say maybe thriller, drama, and horror, but nothing comedy.
Yeah, so I mean, like, I absolutely think that he would be a good fit for it. And I think like maybe that awkward comedy like you're describing, kind of like Joaquin Phoenix Joker, is more what I'd be expecting.
Yeah.
And I think he'd sell that really well. I would love to see that. And I did, just on a little side note, it was Living with Yourself.
There we go.
Yeah, great show.
Highly
Absolutely
recommend it.
fantastic. I just also checked to see if there was a season 2, and it doesn't really look like there was anything. Living with Yourself season 2, blah blah blah. Something, it says something about it was supposed to come out in 2000 or 2021.
Would it get lost in the pandemic?
I don't know, something like that. I think it's still kind of in limbo right now. They'll be able to find the idea Netflix if they've decided Living with Yourself. So I guess Netflix hasn't decided whether or not they want to continue with it or not. But I think with the amount of time that's passed, that's
plus Paul Rudd's probably not an easy get to clear his schedule.
I mean, with him doing all the Marvel stuff right now, because funny enough, not to get too sidetracked, but if you're talking Paul Rudd, he was he wanted to be in Halloween Kills as Tommy Doyle.
Yeah.
But Avengers Endgame happened, so
yeah. And see, and honestly, because I was just watching Halloween Kills, and that kind of jumped in my head of Paul Rudd as being Tommy Doyle, and kind of looking at his portrayal of Tommy Doyle and being kind of that PTSD kind of character, not being able to get away from the events of that original 1978 night, I think is a very real kind of portrayal, I think, and kind of his how disturbed he is also kind of plays, because that is one of the closer straightforward performances that we do get from Paul Rudd in terms of his filmography, because they're few and far between because he leans so much into comedy. But it is honestly probably my favorite take on Tommy Doyle. I know there's only a couple out there, but that's my preferred take. So it's like kind of looking at that, I think he brought so much to that character. Whether that film is great or not, that's up to the viewer. But I think his portrayal of that is probably one of the biggest positives to that film.
Oh yeah. I like him in Halloween 6. I have to say. Like, I mean, there's not much I take away from that film, but I mean, Paul Rudd's Paul Rudd. I fucking love that guy.
And
Like,
I'll
ever
go
since Wet Hot American Summer and stuff like that, like he's brilliant.
in going into Halloween 6 when he is trying to get the cell door open and finally Michael comes out. And he's just like kind of gives a wacky look. He like kind of laughs, doesn't really know what to do. For me is like that's probably how a person would act, to be like, this guy that's been terrifying me for the last 20 years is now in front of me and I have no idea what to do.
Yeah, I think that it's pretty underrated. I mean, like, underrated for a bad movie, but like he definitely has chops. And I mean, he went on to have a great career.
Yep.
So it's just one of those things
Speaks
where it's
for
like, yeah,
itself.
yes, he definitely. I want to see him come back and do that again. I don't know. Maybe if we get the rehash, like people have been saying they want, of, okay, now that we've done the Laurie timeline, let's do Halloween 4, 5, and 6. Let's wipe out that, go off of 4, and continue from there. So
Why not? What's one more sequel, right?
yeah, I guess so. We'll see.
Well, speaking of sequels,
Oh boy.
let's get into our last topic of the Sunday Scaries. Grab the salt and cover your ears because the Sanderson sisters have returned to Salem after 29 years. Another virgin has lit the candle, which means the trio is back to steal the youth and hearts of all the Disney Plus viewers. Released exclusively on the streaming platform in the much long awaited sequel to the original 1993 film, we see the iconic coven take on another threesome of budding witches. The sequel has some familiar faces as well as some new blood as it attempts to pull at our nostalgia strings for the Halloween season. Was there enough magic left for this gateway horror film, or should this have stayed buried with Billy in the graveyard?
All right, Luke. Well, this is your movie. I've said in the past that this was not one that I grew up with. I was more of a Halloween Town kid. And if we're talking Halloween Disney products, that was more my stuff. I like that and the sequels. But if we're talking Halloween Town, this, or Hocus Pocus, this was one of those ones that was big for you growing up.
Yes,
And same for my wife. So
this was in my rotation of horror films. Well, kid
Halloween films.
Yes,
Yeah.
I guess we'll say, because I watched Friday 13th at a very young age, so I was kind of indoctrinated into
Same here,
uh,
brother.
the normal kind of adult horror viewing. So yes, Hocus Pocus, the original, I have an absolute love for. I watched Hocus Pocus 2 last night, and I gotta say, I do not have a love for Hocus Pocus 2. It just did not work for me.
We were working on some content last night, and I basically, like, I started it because my wife and I had plans to watch this after work. We made our little DiGiorno pizzas, sat down with our son. We all sat there on the couch and cuddled up under some blankets, and he was kind of playing with his stuff in between us, and intermittently falling asleep and everything. Just a cute, fun time with the family. And we sat down and we watched this thing. And I remember coming on and I was just like, hey, I ain't going to tell you anything about my feelings of this, other than it was just a movie. And, I don't have that love for this franchise. So I didn't want to fully come in and taint it, just in case if you were to come on here and say, hey, it wasn't that bad. You know what I mean? And I should have known just from my wife's reaction. She hated this. She thought this was so bad. And I get it. I will preface this by saying, before anybody in the comments says, we're not the target audience, we get that.
Yeah.
Okay. I completely understand. We are grown adults. And this is for children. And on those merits, I think that children will probably enjoy this. I think it'll be good fun. It's exciting for them to have a big Disney Plus Halloween movie coming up that they get to sit down and watch. And if it serves that purpose well and people are happy and their kids are happy, great. But for avid fans of the original, it's just so mishandled. Because
Yeah.
we watched, just so you guys know, I refreshed and I watched the first one with my wife earlier this week, just so I could be refreshed and good to go for when this next one comes out.
Yeah.
So I did my homework. So, even though I'm not a fan, I appreciate the first one more after watching it again. And I could see why people love it, but it's just one of those things again where I didn't grow up with it. So it's like I don't have this affinity of like, oh, Hocus Pocus is an all-time classic.
Yeah. And overall, this one did not work. I think there are a lot of missteps in this one, and the tone is just different. I spent the film like looking at it and after the film trying to figure out why is the tone so different here, and I kind of hypothesized a little bit after doing a little research here, where we look at this one. Now the story here is still David Kirshner, who is responsible for some of the Child's Play stuff. After we did Child's Play 2, the name stuck out at me as soon as I had seen it, and I was like, okay, so story by him and two other people, and I was like, okay, so at least he's still attached here. Now the original story by I believe it's David Kirshner and Mick Garris. Now we're talking those two horror guys. You know what I mean? Like those are through and through working on Child's Play. Mick Garris is he's got a resume from Critters to the Shining remake. He everything in between here. So the way that I look at this is that the charm of the first one is yes, it does have some of those tongue in cheek bits, but for a decent amount of it, you can forget that you're watching a kids film, and it has those horror undertones for the most part, and it's kind of like I can look at that one and have fun with it because it takes itself seriously to an extent, whereas this one, the other than David Kirshner, it seems like everyone on this is a comedy writer, and I think that's where this falls flat, where it's like joke after joke after joke. And I understand this is a kid's film, but it seems like so much that the actors and everyone are in on the nostalgia trip in terms of it's almost like hey, we're in on the joke. Bette Midler's in on the joke that she's a Sanderson sister. So it's like it doesn't necessarily work for me in terms of being able to turn this on for an hour 47 or whatever it is and live in the space of Salem, and that the Sanderson sisters are back and trying to steal the youth of the kids to live forever. It just feels like I'm watching a continuous joke throughout the entire film, and the quality of the first one just isn't there.
Yeah, I gotta say, watching these movies in quick succession of each other, because we watched the first one on Wednesday, and so we watched this on Friday. And so, it's just like I walked away from the first one saying, it's again, for not growing up on it, it's still I could see the love for this film. I understand why people it sticks with people. I think the characters are pretty charming for, a Disney. Was that a Disney Channel original movie? Or
I
was that
don't
a
know.
real movie?
I don't know if it was released in theaters or not, to be honest.
But like it has that same charm to me of like a Halloween town.
Yeah.
And it's like I appreciate that stuff. Like especially I think now being a father, like I kind of look at things like this with a different light. And I could sit there and be like, yes, I could really see my son getting into this. And what was heartwarming as a little side note was that, we were watching that first film and he got so, and he's only like 7 months old, but like he would get so enamored at some scenes or he'd just watch it. And like, sometimes we'll watch stuff on TV and like he won't have any interest in it. He'll do his own thing, play with his toys, come harass us or whatever. But like the Hocus Pocus being one of my wife's favorites, it was nice for them to have him just get like so caught up in it for a little bit there, and he was
Yeah.
into it. So it's like I get that. Maybe that's why I'm softening to it. But this one, man, like God, they really just I feel like, and we talked about it a little bit. I think we kind of joked around about how I said there were actual characters in the first film.
Yeah.
And you were like, yeah, for a kid's film, you know what I mean? Yeah, but it's just to me like the characters, they give them nothing. Like they really just are kind of like conduits to get the story from point A to point B to point C, in which where it's like, there's no real development. Like some of the characters, like our main trio, they're at odds with one of them, and you don't really find out why until like the last 15 minutes of the movie. And like one of those characters is hardly in the movie at all. And like they're just kind of doing their own thing. They're trying to make you feel like there's this rift between them and you're supposed to care about it, and then you just don't. And I get that this is a movie for children, but at the same time, it's like there can still be competent writing. Like you can
Yeah.
still do a great job with this. And my wife took issue with the songs. The music is very classic in that original. A lot of it, where it's like a lot of people are very like attached to that. And they were saying that there's just not a single song in here that they were impressed with. It just really to them, it did not feel like Hocus Pocus. It felt like just another random Disney Channel, throw it on. It's a spooky Halloween special movie.
Yeah, it honestly felt like you could have just recasted the original trio in terms of more current, random actors, and just been like, this is a remake or something, in straight to Disney Plus. It didn't feel in line with the original enough for me. Where it's like looking at this, when you're deeming it Hocus Pocus 2, I feel like you're marrying yourself to a certain quality at that point, because you're saying that this is a sequel. This is something that we want to be attached to that first film. So you can't unmarry yourself from the quality, at least in my eyes here. So I'm always going to be comparing it to see if it's an adequate sequel to the original. And this, I just don't feel, it just feels so different. It really does feel like that first film, I could have, where we have that, I can't, for me, it lived its life on TV, but I could easily see that being released in theaters, and it feels like it could be released in theaters. Whereas this one, if I went to see this in a theater, I feel like I would have been like, why was this released in a theater? Because it doesn't have that theatrical quality experience for me. It's like it legitimately feels like made for TV. So I can understand why this was a Disney Plus kind of vehicle instead of actually being in the theater. Whereas this one, it's doesn't, again, going back to those horror undertones, it doesn't really feel like that. Like I have a coworker who just showed her granddaughters the original for the very first time, and they're very young. And it's like she had told me coming in the next day where like one of them was like covering her eyes, asking if certain parts are over yet. Where it's like, to kids, not us, but some of those things can be very frightening, and it works. Whereas like jumping into Hocus Pocus 2, I would be very surprised if any kid actually found anything in this film frightening, or in that sense. So because it plays so much comedy, that I don't think that really works. And like going into the actual characters of the trio of budding witches, I guess, where there is that kind of disconnect, where there's a rift between them. And then it's all resolved very quickly after they just randomly see the Sanderson sisters flying down the road, and it's like all is well for a while. In that kind of introduction, going from the original to the sequel, where they light the candle in the first one, the Sanderson sisters, knock down the door, and they're right there at the opening of the cabin. In this one, the candle's lit, and they just appear in the woods dancing, and I'm like, there was no real tension there for me. It's like it should have been this huge moment of them reappearing on screen. Instead, it just played for pure comedy. And I'm like, this isn't really working as a sequel to the original Hocus Pocus. There's just something missing throughout this entire film.
Yeah, it really feels like they're playing on the Hocus Pocus name as much as they can. Because like there's even elements in this movie where like a character has a certain thing happen to them towards the end of the film, and they just allude to the fact of their age playing a factor into that. But there's no real reason for them to be able to do what they can do. They never get into it. They never explain any backstory or anything like that. And, it's just like they just feel like these hollow characters that are, again, just little vessels for the story to kind of move forward. And, really at the end of the day, I think the Sanderson sisters, the original trio, are the only thing that I would say is worth coming back to seeing. Because like I think that they're, they do feel like those characters, but I feel like they just don't really have much else to do. Like the story itself is just kind of meaningless. It's like
Yeah.
if you would have taken some more time to kind of construct a story that was worth it, then I think that you could have potentially had something worthy to follow up the first one, and something that people would be happy to put on after they watch the first one again and again. But I think that they just kind of really pivoted this towards children, which again, I get it, it is, but you got to understand that there's a large adult audience that has nostalgia for this.
Yeah. And
And
I mean, like when you go to Spirit Halloween and there's a whole section for Hocus Pocus, there's your audience in this fashion where you're not making Hocus Pocus 2 just for the kids anymore. There's a whole adult audience that has a love for the first one and has been itching to see a sequel for this one. And like we were talking about that original trio, for me it didn't work because again, going back to that original, Winifred Sanderson feels like Winifred Sanderson, where now it feels like Bette Midler is playing her. In this one where it's like they're in on the joke, it's a little tongue in cheek, be like, yeah, look at me, I'm playing Winifred. Where it didn't allow me to suspend my disbelief for the length of the film, where I kept being reminded that this is a nostalgic sequel to it. So none of it really worked for me.
yeah, this is a very Disney-fied sequel. This is very much that, to a lighter extent, I would say, very Force Awakens-esque, where it's just kind of like, oh, we have these new characters and we're bringing them in, and then we have the old characters. But like, it's just at this point, it's been done so many times, and it's a copy of a copy of a copy that they're just kind of like, we're going to lightly do that, throw the name on it, throw it on Disney Plus, and get our clicks and subscriptions and get our headlines. And that's unfortunately what it feels like. Again, if you show this to your children and they absolutely adore it, then it did its job. That's great.
Yeah.
But if you're as someone who's coming into this as an adult and, who understands the love and everything for the older one, if you're coming into this expecting that level of, like, I'm going to enjoy this and I'm going to like really get to have a worthy sequel to this film that I grew up with and loved, you're not getting that here.
Yeah. It's very much different. Like, I don't think this is going to be for Hocus Pocus fans, but I think this could be for fans that are just coming into the franchise. Like, I think you could watch Hocus Pocus 2 without knowing of Hocus Pocus and still get a decent feel for what the movie is like. So it's like I could see a lot of kids really just watching this first or the second film and really enjoying it and just kind of living in that aspect of the comedy and Halloween season. I think on that aspect it would work, but I think Hocus Pocus fans coming in thinking that they're going to get reminiscent of that original, it's just not going to work for you.
It's tough, man. Sorry this one didn't work out for you, bud. I mean,
I'll go back and watch the original handful of times before October 31st. So
there you go.
I will persevere, sir.
Hey, at least you still got it. I am definitely going to be checking out Halloween Town, maybe even later today. Who knows? That sounds like a good little spot. I want to sit there with the boy and soak that up. It's been many years since I've seen it, and then all the sequels are on there too. Which, say what you will about the quality of those, but I'll watch all of them. I don't give a shit.
I saw that they made a remake and sequel to Under Wraps, which was an original 1997 Disney film. Yeah, you didn't see it. It's about a mummy, obviously, but I'm kind of scared to check those out. But I think I might dive into those films. They're probably horrible. What?
What's a mummy?
No, a mommy.
Oh, I get you. Okay, feel it. Anyway, we're gonna pop into my segment now that wraps up our Hocus Pocus review with a little thing that we love to call this week's Gorecast.
The top of the world, fabulous 1340 KAP, Antonio Bay.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen. So on this week's Gorecast, we got a lot going on. Definitely a little bit more of a interesting week as opposed to last week, in my opinion. Here, like, we had some good stories, but this, as you can see, I kind of really got my shit together on how I want to orientate everything and all that good stuff. So obviously, as I always do, we're going to start at the top here with some of these Blu-ray and 4K announcements, things to keep your eyes out for. Vinegar Syndrome had quite a bit going on this week, and one of those big ones was, for me, was the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. Tobe Hooper's sequel to his seminal classic is getting a 4K release from Vinegar Syndrome. Now, there is no hard release date on this. I believe it is set to come out this month, though.
Oh man, that's a quick turnaround.
They all said that they're coming out in October.
Oh wow.
But I don't know when exactly they're coming out. But this is a point of contention for Luke and I for sure. I'm actually pretty soft on this movie. The first time I saw it, I was just kind of iffy on it. I didn't really get it as much, but I've gone back and watched it a few times since then, and I kind of know the backstory to it a little bit more. And I've grown to kind of put this on its own little spot. And for that, I can enjoy it. I think the Chop Top's a great character. I think that it's got a lot of fun elements to it. And, it's really just, if you look at it as a horror comedy, it can be a fun time to sit back and just watch.
Yeah, for me, I vary a little bit on that aspect, and by little, I mean a lot. It just, that sequel does not work for me. It's too much of a departure from a masterpiece that they created. So I don't think it was needed in any sense. I have only seen it a handful of times. I think the first time I'd watched it, as I think it was on TV, and people were like, "Oh yeah, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 is it's a good movie," and I watched it, and I was not pleased. So I'd go back and watch it to make sure I wasn't missing anything. I will go back and watch it again because I know me and Dylan will talk about it at some point.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna make you watch it.
And I will dissect it bit by bit as we do here on the Sunday Scaries. So I don't think I'm gonna be hopping on that 4K release. Maybe if Dylan jumps on that, I'll borrow it from him.
Oh yeah, this will be one that I'll try to grab at some point down the road. I would love to own this. Other things that we can look out for on 4K would be, this was a fun one for me. I don't remember how you feel about this one. I think we've talked about it before, but the Dawn of the Dead remake by Zack Snyder is getting a 4K upgrade from Scream Factory. So that was announced. No artwork for it just yet, but they did a release before, so you're getting that, but just upscaled to 4K, which is going to be pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by it. I do like that remake as well. I look at it differently from the original. So
yeah, it's a very different. That's exactly how I feel about it too. Is that it's very different from the first, but it's almost like a nice little offshoot. It's kind of its own thing.
And I think it recreates the world in line with what we had originally saw, so it doesn't feel like a departure at all. So that one, it's probably not going to be a immediate pickup, but I would love to see that 4K version of it. So it'll be a definite on the list of things to pick up at some point, maybe during a sale or something.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't know if that would be a day one for me, but that would definitely be something where it's like, if I get a good deal on it, I would definitely pick it up. As for our UK fans and listeners, you guys are getting something kind of cool. You're getting the Pennywise Story of It is coming out through Kaleidoscope. They are putting that bad boy out on Blu-ray for you guys. I don't know. I tried to do some research. I don't know if we're getting a release over in the US for it. And
I would love to own that one.
Oh yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think we said it in our little review that we did months ago. That it's one that I want to own. I want to put it on my shelf next to my Crystal Lake memories and everything. Let me see here. Yeah, so there is no official release date on Blu-ray.com for it in the US. It doesn't look like there's going to be. It's right now. It's not saying anything.
Is that region locked?
Then? I believe it is region locked. Yes, it's going to be region B. And then also, yeah. So the only thing we have United States wise is the digital release. Okay. So you can own it on Vudu and things like that, but there isn't any physical release just yet. So the UK fans, you guys are getting that before us here in the US. So definitely hop on that if you can. If you haven't seen it, it's definitely a fantastic doc. Luke and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, a lot of great stuff in there. It really makes you want to go back and watch that miniseries again, just after you get all the knowledge from that documentary. It will look beautiful on your shelf, especially if you display it with that cover art out. I absolutely love it. It really attracts visually so nice. Um, a lot of great information, like you said. It's really on par with that kind of Crystal Lake Memories and does it Never Sleep Again?
Hmm.
Really informative documentary. I mean, with the quality of these horror documentaries coming out lately, I'm really excited to brush up on a few more.
No, I agree. And then the only other thing that really caught my eye, this is a film that neither of us are familiar with, but because of the content and the subject matter, I felt I would throw it out here for Luke and I just to get it on our radars. It's called Moon of the Wolf from Vinegar Syndrome. It's a 1972 werewolf flick. And I'm pretty interested in that. I'm always down for a werewolf movie. I will check anything out of any quality, just to see it, because I love those creatures, and I don't think there's enough representation in film for them, especially recently.
Yeah,
So if I can get my hands on it, I'll definitely check it out. It is on Tubi, so it's one of those things where you can check this puppy out and see for yourself if you like it, and then if you really like it, you can pick this up when it releases later this month.
give yourself the old test watch, which I'm probably going to do as well. I'm intrigued by this one. You said it was an early '70s film, is that right?
Hmm.
I'm intrigued to see that kind of take on a werewolf film, to see what kind of effects and where they want to go with it. Because a lot of those times, a lot of things, less is more. So I'm curious to kind of see what kind of tension they build. So I think this will be worth a watch. And then after that, decide on whether I will actually put the funds toward this one. I like the cover already, though.
Oh yeah, no, it looks beautiful. But yeah, that's gonna do us for Blu-rays and 4K. So we had some great announcements this week. I was definitely pretty happy, pretty jealous of our friends over across the pond there getting that Blu-ray, but I'm sure we'll get our due at some point. Maybe again, Scream Factory or somebody will put that bad boy out for us, and we can have all that, and maybe there will be some decent special features and whatnot. I don't know what kind of special features you put with a documentary, but I'd love to see a little bit of how they assembled this thing and
Yeah.
everything. The documentary on the documentary, as
There we
as
go.
you could say.
Perfect.
It's like documentaryception.
We'll consume all that content. So there's definitely a market out for there.
Oh yeah. So this little segment I'm deeming leftover bits, just some little stories that kind of come to us with the Gorecast here that aren't major stories, but things to look out for, whether it's deals, things like that, or stuff to basically do with the content we like to pick up. So we've got the Walmart Halloween box set. Luke, you got your hands on one of these, and you were pretty excited about it, I would say, right? Like that was a pretty good deal.
Yes, it was a great deal considering the quality of those films. I
Ye-
still questioned whether that was an error or not, as before I purchased it. And I was like, I'm gonna make the jump and gonna get that. So we were monitoring the situation closely there to see if it was gonna be canceled or not. And then I
And
got go ahead.
no. I was gonna say, go for it.
Well, I was checking that app. Days passed, and it still said it was processing. Went through on the credit card, and then one day I logged in, and I got the dreaded canceled notification on there. So yes, they did finally catch that error. Walmart is very stingy and did not honor those, so they are dishonorable corporation. And I'm gonna go straight to their headquarters and tell them about it because I'm sure they care.
Oh yeah, they're gonna totally just laugh you off and be like, dude, come on, like give us a break. I saw a lot of people upset about this and online, and honestly, I would be too. Just because it's like, they are a billion-dollar corporation, and they can totally afford to take a hit like this with something like that. It's not like a local business screwing something up like this. And it's just fun. It's good for people who got it. I don't think a ton of people got their hands on it, but again, it just comes off as like you really couldn't just give it to the guys who got lucky. Like it was your screw up on your end. Like I would have just honored it if I
Yeah,
was, in their shoes, probably. Just because, again, it would have really saved face too, I think, for some of your customers who did grab it. because it is just something where it's like it was up for what, an hour like that.
Yeah, it wasn't an overabundance of time, so I can't imagine too many people had grabbed it.
Yeah, because by the time people started reporting about it, it was already long and
Yeah,
changed.
and it was like midday, or early to midday, so it wasn't like it was just out on a weekend day.
Yeah, and I saw people in comment sections that, to me, say what you will about it, they seem more bitter than anything about it. I think they were bitter that they didn't get in on it. Oh
Yeah.
man, what you got going on
We
your
got a
side
little
there,
wild situation I can't see out there, but
bud?
sirens are going here on a Sunday morning.
They're coming for us because we were talking shit about Walmart.
There it is. They have their hands and eyes and ears into everything.
But yeah, so what I was getting at was just that, like, I think people were on there just defending Walmart and saying, like, oh, like you should have known better. They were never going to honor this. They have no obligation to. And whether that's true or not, you know what I mean? It's just kind of like, well, why wouldn't you want like your fellow man to get a deal like this? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. It just felt kind of stingy and, bad. Like when you got it, like, cause I was definitely like, oh shit, I can't believe I missed that. But the fact that you got it, like, I was thrilled. Like, I was like, oh, fuck yeah, dude. Because, like, that's a great price. We're going to be able to check this thing out, maybe even throw it up as some content for the channel. Because there's no way we're paying over $100 for those 3 movies.
Yeah, not at all.
No. Like,
I mean, they're just going to sit there. I mean, the people who got it because there was a deal, not because they wanted those 3 films.
Mm-hmm. And, some people had a good point on there that maybe they canceled it. They would have honored it, but maybe they canceled it because there were people who probably ordered like the max amount that they could, and they were going to resell them, which that's scummy in and of itself. But at the same time, to me, and maybe you couldn't go through and do this, but I think you should have, is just go through. And it's like, if someone orders 1, then, let that slide, let them have it for that price. It was up, they paid for it, you charge their card, it's fair game. You know what I mean? But like if you had somebody who ordered 10, then I could see canceling that order because it's like, you're just flipping them at that point.
Yeah, you're monitored for suspicious activity, and if you just got 1, I mean, let it slide. But there's too stingy.
Absolutely
ridiculous.
But hey, you know what? It was too good to be true. But it was fun while it lasted. So thank you, Walmart. Another reason why we don't really love you.
You've officially ruined Halloween. And I am bowing out of Splatterthon because of Walmart.
Oh, come on, man. I had nothing to do with that. Don't fuck me here.
Listen, man. It lasted 2 days. Splatterthon had a good
Splatterthon is over, baby. Alrighty, but yeah, moving into a couple other things to keep an eye out for. Voodoo has released their killer deals, which I always look forward to this. They update it every single weekend. You can always look on there and see what they've got going on. It just gets better and better as the month goes on. So the closer you get to Halloween, the better those deals are, it seems like. Couple things that are sticking out to me, and I just pulled it up on my app here so that way you guys can see what we're getting at. But I mean, you're talking The Cursed, which was one of the great early ones to come out this year. $4.99. I mean, you can't beat that price for that. That's a great film. Killer Clowns, $4.99. Like, that's an awesome deal. Howard Hawks' The Thing, so you kind of get to see where that came from.
I think they had all the critters on there too. I think
they
I
did.
Saw that.
Yep. Enemy is $4.99. That's a Denis Villeneuve. It's great. He's the guy who did Prisoners and Dune and Blade Runner. He's got some good stuff on there. Yeah, all the critters. I mean, there are some winners on here for the first starting of this sale. So definitely get on there and take a look if there's anything for you. Personally, for me, there was nothing on here that I jumped out and bought, but I'm kind of just saving my wallet until, like I said, we get a little closer, usually about a week out from Halloween. Like once we get down to the 20s, that's when you start to really see those good deals, especially on bundles. So that's what I'm going to kind of be keeping an eye out for as we get a little bit in there. And I think at least for this entire month, I'll probably mention the Voodoo Killer deals just to talk about what's on there, what's changed, because there will definitely be some good stuff. And, one that I'd like to get my hands on, which is on sale for the fall bundle extravaganza, which they're doing, but it's still a little too pricey for me. I've seen it get lower and I've never pulled the trigger on it. Is the Nightmare on Elm Street set on digital. I have
Okay.
it back here. It's a great set to own, at least till we get a Scream Factory version. But it's one of those things where it's just like I want them all digitally, because right now my Voodoo, I have all the Friday the 13th, so I have all the Halloweens, which I completed last year, and I just want to put. Oh, I have all the Evil Dead films as well, but I just want to make a nice little bundle of Nightmare on Elm Street, keep my everything going.
Yeah, I think I have them all SD, so I need to upgrade those to HD because I'm an elitist. But one of the things on the killer deals that I think that is on there is The Good Son.
Yep, that is on here.
I highly recommend that film. Macaulay Culkin and Elijah Wood, early '90s film, a different role for Macaulay Culkin. I was talking about Paul Rudd earlier, and Jim Carrey and Cable Guy were departures in terms of what we're used to seeing. Definitely a different role for Macaulay Culkin. Highly recommend that film. I think that's a really good price. It is hard to come by, so for a $4.99 deal is a hell of a deal.
Killer deal, as some would say.
No.
And then honestly, the thing I had to throw on here, which was really great, Luke brought this to my attention before I could check my email. Was this on Thursday or Friday that you sent this to me?
Thursday, maybe?
I think you're right. But Scream Factory is doing Shocktober, in which they are slashing prices deeply for their Halloween
A lot of good deals.
events. Oh my God. It's also fair to mention their 10-year anniversary this month. So 10 years of Scream Factory. Thank you guys. Fucking love your work. Love all your
Great
stuff.
content.
Always great. Always enjoy spending my money with that company, especially because, again, when the Friday the 13th set came out, I was one of the unlucky few who showed up damaged. It wasn't my outer box or anything. It was just my part 7. When they were printing it off, it must have got clipped or something because it was shredded.
Yeah.
The artwork was. And I remember I sent you that picture in that video. I tweeted them. They immediately got back to me and said, hey, email us at this email or at this email address that's connected here. And I put in for it, and I got my new case within like 2 weeks. And, it was pristine. It was great. They sent me a new Blu-ray case and artwork, which was awesome of them. And then also they, with that, we had the issue with, was it Jason Goes to Hell?
Yes. Yep.
The unrated version was missing a sequence of gore that everyone was expecting or something. And they did. They literally said, all right, come on here. And anybody who wants the discs, the updated disc, and it was part 3, the 3D, didn't work. So they rectified that. And, I give them a break because that set was announced and it was all coming out during the pandemic. Like, that was deep pandemic when all that was happening.
Oh, yeah.
But it's great. I'm happy to have it. I absolutely adore that set. I wouldn't trade it for the world. And I'm just super happy with it. And I mean, awesome. We got the lithograph and poster if you were within the first 13,000 people. So fucking great. I love it.
And they honestly, regardless of what happened when you got those Friday 13th box sets, they really took the time to package those things perfectly so that, minimal damage in terms of shipping. We just kind of berated Walmart for being a stingy company. I'll say Scream Factory really knows how to do customer service right for a lot of people, because people want to spend. They'll spend a good deal of money on this high quality collector's item kind of versions of things, so it's like you want it pristine, and they know that, and they listen. So if you have an issue and you bring it to them, they get back to you in a timely manner. It's wild. Because you're so used to waiting and waiting and waiting, they respond very quickly. So it's no surprise to me they've been around for 10 years, but it's just like great artwork, great extras. They never disappoint, and there's a lot of great deals on that Shocktober sale.
Oh my God, I was just about to get into that too, because like even things like recent releases like Alligator on 4K is $19.99. Alligator 2 is $14.99. Assault on Precinct 13 is $10. Like, that stuff's great, man.
Yeah. A lot of great stuff on there. I'm excited. I did breeze through it for a second, haven't committed to anything, but I know there's a handful of things I'm definitely gonna pull the trigger on. As we're talking about this, we really should do some sort of 10 for 10, and test like some 10 best releases from them at some point.
Ooh, that'd be great. Yeah, no, that's a good idea.
Probably not in October since we're jam packed. But
yeah, we're good on content right now. I don't want that. We'll save that one maybe for Christmas. I don't know.
Yeah,
That might be a
that
good
would be
one.
perfect. Essential buys for.
Oh yeah, and
the
I mean,
horror
like, dude,
fan.
just looking through some of this stuff, like, I mean, a lot of the 4K stuff is still kind of up there. That's to be expected because that's very specialty. But like, dude, the 4Ks for the Halloween films are $18.50.
That is not bad at all.
No,
I think that's the best deal that they've been thus far.
yeah, Halloween 3 is $18.50. Halloween 2, I don't need the first one. I have the Best Buy Steelbook.
Yeah.
And that's gonna be my edition that I'm keeping. But yeah, dude, like, these are great. All the Carpenter stuff is discounted. Like, you can get $17.49 for They Live on 4K.
All deals. All
Mouth
deals.
of Madness. In the Mouth of Madness, $17.47.
That's one I was looking at for sure.
Big Trouble in Little China, $14. Like,
Can't beat it. There are some that are under the $10 mark, I believe, too.
yes, some of them are $9.99 or less. It's some great stuff. Like, highly recommend checking this stuff out because that's why we put it on here. So the deals are only going until, I believe that says the 7th.
I think.
Yeah, so definitely keep an eye out for that. If you want to get on it.
And they may
You
go
got
quick.
5 days. So yeah, while supplies last. Alrighty, but that's going to bring us into the last little segment here. We kind of teased it. We talked a lot about Hellraiser on this, but obviously that's coming to Hulu, so keep an eye out for that review, as that's going to come out Thursday night for you, real late or early, depending on how you look at it. We're going to stay up and we're going to put it all up and post it. So if you want to wake up on Friday morning and check that review out, that'll be available for you.
Spend another morning with us.
Probably going to be doing a separate spoiler video. We're still going to talk it out. We're going to see how much we have to say on it, and we'll decide there. But keep an eye out for the night before. This one's going to be kind of late because it's actually a long movie. Looking into it, it's 2.5 hours.
Oh wow, I did not know that. That is
yeah.
going to be an undertaking in itself.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. But Terrifier 2, we are going to see it. We're taking
committed.
A little trek. We're going up to Orange, what is that? Orange County, Orange, Ohio,
Orange Village or something like
Orange
that.
Village.
I believe.
Never even heard
Beechwood.
of it. Okay, Beechwood. So going up to Beechwood. For those of you who don't know, we're more southern. We're down towards the Akron, Cuyahoga Falls area. So it's like, that's where we're at. So we're going to be taking a trek up there, see Terrifier 2 for you guys. We're also going to be putting out a review for Terrifier sometime this week. So we just got to get that thing recorded and in the bag because we got to check it out. It's one that Luke and I aren't familiar with, but we understand that, the horror community loves Art the Clown and all this stuff. So we want to get involved, give you our thoughts and opinions on that.
Yeah, it's been a blind spot for both of us for a minute.
I've seen All Hallows Eve, which is where he first came to.
Okay, I have not.
Yeah, I would say for you, maybe watch maybe because I think it's just a segment that he's in. If I remember correctly. So it's like I would just check that out on its own. But it was years ago I watched it.
Okay. Yeah, so big blind spot. I know that you see Art the Clown popping up on Twitter all the time, so it's been one that we've been meaning to dive into, and that event for Terrifier 2 is really just giving us a reason to fully commit to Art the Clown and see what's going on here. So yeah, that's certainly going to be a long night for us in terms of viewing and reviewing. So don't plan on us getting any sleep for a minute at least. That should be very interesting. I'm intrigued to see what this is all about. Definitely going to dive into that first one as well. And we'll give you our full thoughts on Thursday night.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how it goes. Fantastic Fest has a lot of good things to say about it. They say they like it more than the first. And it's one of those things where this is a very low budget series. So it's kind of like getting a little bit more attention, a little bit more money, and giving the guy a little bit more creativity and freedom to tell the stories that he wants. I hear that it is an absolute gore fest.
Oh, perfect.
Terrifier 2. I hear that it is shockingly violent.
Oh, man.
So it's like it is one of those ones where they just sit down and they throw you on for a wild ride. So it's just kind of like I'm excited for that.
We'll see if it's another experience film.
Oh yes, an experience. That's what we've been throwing around the last month here. September was the month of experience films.
There we
if
go.
I
You had
do
to
say so.
experience it to know what we're talking about.
Yeah, and the last little thing I'm going to bring up here, obviously we've been talking about it. We're in the Splatterthon. This is, volume 1 here. First year we're doing this. So we have a lot of great content coming to you this week, not only just at these reviews, but we do have some great original content coming to you all week long and all month long. So keep your eyes peeled for that. I think we're going to have a lot of great stuff hitting, and it's going to be a lot of fun. We've been putting a lot of work into this and trying to make this something special for you guys. We did just have yesterday our announcement video for the giveaway, in which we're going to be giving away, and I'll pop us back in here so that way Luke can show it off. You got the stuff by you, or
I always do.
perfect. So we're giving away a copy of the Black Phone on Blu-ray, and as well as the Splatterthon mug. So I can hold this up because I have one. But yeah, the Splatterthon mug and the Black Phone will be given away to you. If you go to the link in the description here, you can find the video with the announcement. All the rules and regulations will be described in that video for you, and they will also be in the description itself on how to enter and how to get involved. So you have until the 30th at midnight, and we will definitely get you on there. We're going to be doing a live stream at the end of the month where we're going to watch the Black Phone with you guys. For anybody who wants to pop in, even just for a few minutes, do a little live commentary on that and watch it. Even if it's just Luke and I, we're just going to sit there and watch the damn movie. So
we're gonna play Naughty Boy.
Yes. Okay. No, I don't want to play Naughty Boy with you. But no, we're gonna have a good time, and if you enter, you can be one of the lucky few that comes in and walks away with the Blu-ray and the mug. So pretty cool. As well as other content, like I said, coming out this month. So keep an eye out on the channel. Lots of great stuff hitting all the time.
Oh man, we have a big schedule all laid out. A lot of content already in the can, ready to go. And thank you for sticking with us here all throughout Splatterthon, and of course over 2 hours on the Sunday Scaries.
I know this was a big one for us.
Jam-packed episode.
Yeah, we really committed hard on this one. But hey, that's what it's here for. That's what we do for you. We always come out in big swing. But we had a lot to say. This is a good week for news. You know what I mean?
A lot of things going on.
Like I said, the Gorecast was stacked this week. So
oh man, too many things. That wallet is going to be empty, sir.
I hope so. I mean, no, actually I don't. I can't say that now. I have a kid. I can't do that. But before, man, I could go a few days without anything, but it is what it is.
Not anymore, sir.
Nope, I got commitments. But yeah, I guess that's bringing us to the end of the show there, Luke.
I think so. So you want to give us all our credentials out there, or
Sure thing. So obviously, we just talked about the Splatterthon, so definitely keep an eye out for all that stuff. Like I said, the giveaway, the live stream, everything else in between. Lots of great stuff coming to you guys this month. And then also, we just had our podcast on Hellraiser release on last Monday. That's doing really well for us. It seems like you guys really like that one. So, it was a lot of fun to do. Definitely check that one out and all the previous episodes before it, as well as our review for things like Smile. And we also, just like I said, did a Halloween 1978 review as to kick off the Splatterthon, to kick off the month of October. Just, a little review discussion. It's not as in-depth. That will be on the Splatterthon at some point. But just something to get it out there and let you guys know how we're feeling about that. Because that's a franchise that is near and dear to our heart, clearly. And just that first movie, man. It was just a wonderful conversation. Great video. I quite enjoyed talking about it.
And we barely touched on anything,
I know.
For so long. So it's like that is just such a essential viewing for any horror fan, or really any filmmaker in general, I feel. great from beginning to end. Like you said, a lot of fun to talk about. We'll have any excuse we can to talk about that film. Just a masterpiece in general.
Oh, absolutely. Other than that, you guys can keep up with us on our social media. We are on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at SplattercastPod, where you can find us on there. Keep up the conversation. Find us for updates and everything as well. If you do not want to watch our faces, you just want to hear our voices, you can also find us on things like Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Music, and all the other places where podcasts are found. So yeah, I think that's going to wrap us up here. This is a long episode, but a lot of great conversation. I'm pretty talked out, so I think I'll pass it over to my boy here. You got anything else for the people?
Oh man, no, just like you said, very long episode, lot to cover, and we're just getting started here in Splatterthon in the month of October. First episode down of the Sunday Scaries. We have a handful more throughout October. We have a long road to October 31st, but
Oh
stick
yeah.
with us all throughout because we've got a lot of original content for you. So we're glad you're spending it here on Splattercast with us. But yeah, we'll be back next week after a very long week of new content coming right your way. But until then, I'm Luke Janesco.
And I'm Dylan Newell.
And friends, stay scared.